All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Tuesday, February 7th, 2023, and I welcome you to a workshop of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County. It is an absolutely beautiful day today in Manatee County, and we're going to start the way we always start the day. We're going to start by honoring God and then by honoring our great nation. Today we have Pastor Becky Manasseh from Resonate Life Church, who will deliver the prayer, after which County Commissioner and Marine Corps veteran Jason Bearden will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able at this time, please stand.
Good morning. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this beautiful paradise that we call home here in Manatee County. Your creation is so beautiful, and we are grateful that we have the privilege of enjoying it every day. We pray a hedge of protection around about these 893 square miles, that no harm can infiltrate from the outside through crime, drugs, or any future storms. Lord, we pray that any evil that's within our county, that you would uncover it, bring it to justice, and that you would put the heat under them so that they would simply leave town. Thank you, Lord, for each of these great elected leaders of our county that are before me. I pray that your hand of protection, your hand of blessing would be upon each one of them and their families, that they would walk worthy of this calling to oversee and to govern over this great Manatee County. Lord, I thank you for the promise for them that is found in 1 Corinthians 2, 9 and 10, that the Spirit of God can reveal to us answers to what seems to be impossible situation and questions. In the natural, they may seem larger than our own understanding, but when we inquire of you and listen, you will uncover the answers for these situations. So today, on February 7th of 2023, we ask for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding for our county leaders, so that they may not just make good decisions, but God-inspired decisions, the best long-term decisions and solutions that will be a blessing to Manatee County for generations to come. Lord, we ask all this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Manasseh. That was absolutely beautiful. Really appreciate that. And Mr. Bearden, you did a fine job as well. All right, we'll go ahead and begin the workshop. I'll turn this over to Dr. Hopes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This morning, we will begin with Development Services. And just a reminder that after the work session today, you have the Council of Governments meeting at 4 o'clock at the Convention Center. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deputy County Administrator Courtney DePaul to go through a presentation regarding the development services and building fees.
Thank you, Dr. Hopes. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Courtney DePaul. I'm a Deputy County Administrator, and I'm also the Director of Development Services. And so we're here today. The plan is we're going to give you a little bit of an overview, as well as the public, of Building Division and some of the incredible accomplishments that we've had over the past year, including many efficiencies that we've realized. And so to kick that off, we're going to have Bill Palmer, who's our building official, come up here. And then after that, we're going to introduce our building fee consultant. And so they'll walk you through the work that they've done. And then we will open it up for commissioner discussion, seeking guidance for our path ahead. So with that, I'm going to call Bill Palmer up here, and we're going to run through what our building division does and highlight some of those great things that we've been working on. So.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Dr. Hopes. My name is Bill Palmer. I'm the Building Services Division Manager and the County Building Official. Today we're here to talk about removing the temporary fee adjustment that was put into place last year to reduce our reserves. So I thought it'd be a good time to talk to the commission and tell them about the building department, the importance of it, what our goals are for the coming year, the great things ahead that are going to come into our department. And also, more importantly, I want to talk about cuts that we've made in our department to reduce fees, to reduce our costs so we're not passing it on to the community. The importance of the building department, this photo here, as you can see, is a picture that was taken of this destruction of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Probably 1 million people have seen this photograph many, many times. Before Hurricane Andrew hit, back in the early 70s, I think it was the mid-70s, the state of Florida said, that we need to have a minimum building code for health and safety. So what they did was they had said to each jurisdiction that you're going to be responsible for regulating your building codes and doing inspections. And these communities, different jurisdictions, basically picked from a book of code compliance, code organizations that was kind of loosely written. And they just did inspections the way they seen fit, and nobody regulated it. When Hurricane Andrew hit and the devastation that was brought upon us, it was quite obvious that what the communities were doing in the jurisdictions and the way they were doing inspections wasn't working at all. And we had insurance companies that pulled out of the state of Florida. The state had to develop its own insurance company, and a lot of homeowners couldn't get homeowners insurance anymore. So the state realized that, that they need to do something about it, that just because one community got hit with devastation, it basically affected the entire state of Florida. So what they did was they basically developed a statewide building code that each jurisdiction would need to follow. And that was established in 2000. And after that, we're probably on our, 8th or 10th edition from there, maybe even more. And now all of our inspectors, they need to have experience in construction. They need to be take a series of tests. They need to be licensed by the state of Florida. And now, the state of Florida dictates how inspections are done, how buildings are designed, so we could mitigate the damage, that Hurricane Andrew caused. So our 2023 goals is we have, 3 basic goals. The first is that we want to provide the highest level of service possible for our community. We want people to build in Manatee County. We want Manatee County to grow. And we want to make it easy for them. When they come into the building department, we want them to have a good experience from the time they enter the permit department to the time out in the field when they complete their project. We want to, make it as easy and smooth as possible. We also want to leverage technology to make us more efficient. In the past couple of years, we've had implemented, a couple of technology programs that have been really, really successful. So we want to continue on doing that so we can increase our efficiency. We also want to conduct contractor workshops and community outreach. We had a contractor workshop last year, which was really successful, and we want to have at least, maybe one every quarter. This way it gives the contractors and developers and homeowners a chance to meet with us. We could educate them on our processes to make, the permitting process smoother for them. And also it gives us the opportunity for us to listen to them to see what we can do to make it easier for them, to get through the process. So that's what we're really looking to do and plan on doing for this year. Cost-saving measures. We've taken a number of cost-saving measures in this year. We've eliminated spare vehicles that we didn't need. We eliminated supervisory positions where we combined supervisory positions together. You know, just through natural attrition, we've done this. And we've also tightened up our uniform policy, apparel policy, so we saved a lot of money there. And we also didn't fill 4 new positions that we were given in our budget. And we didn't fill those positions. And amazingly enough, with all these cuts, we're still maintaining a high level of service for our community. And we'll continue to do that. And it's important to note that because we want to make sure that the community knows that we're taking all measures we can to, you know, make the cuts in our department so we don't pass those costs on to the community. Next slide, we have the great things to come this year. One of them is the View Spec program. We've had success in the past couple of years with a limited virtual inspection program where we were just doing roof inspections and AC inspections, and it worked out really, really well. Now that we have this View Spec program, we could expand this onto many, many more inspections. So this is going to save the inspectors a lot of travel time. It's going to, you know, help the contractors out, and we're also going to, you know, have a discount to the contractors that opt to use the, you know, the virtual program. The other program that we're going to implement is the Open Counters program. That's going to be a really great program. It's a web-based navigational program that residents or can, you know, homeowners, contractors can go online, and it basically takes them to a series of questions where they can find out exactly what's needed to, you know, to get a permit, what they're going to need, you know, what they need to submit, and then actually start applying online at that point. And hopefully that'll, you know, save time with our staff. That'll reduce the number of phone calls that we have. So this way, you know, they can concentrate on, you know, other tasks at hand. So we're really looking forward to that. The other major program is going to be our condo milestone program. Now that program's actually statutorily we have to implement that. So that's a program that's going to basically keep our residents safe. We're going to, you know, start to monitor, you know, the age of condominium buildings and apartment buildings, and after so many years, they'll need to get inspected, and we'll have to keep track of that and make sure that they're inspected. We don't do the inspections, but we will keep track and record, you know, when the engineers do these inspections and submit them to us. And we're also going to, again, do contractor workshops. That's important. This here is our management team who are here today. We basically have 5 sections in our department. We have the permanent, we have plans review, we have inspections, we have floodplain, and we have licensing. These sections are managed by a group of highly dedicated people. I can't speak more highly of them. They work hard. They're dedicated professionals. Every day they work hard to make sure that the daily operations of the building department, you know, is run smoothly and flawlessly. So they do a great job. So I'm going to turn this over now to Deanna Ward, who's the permanent manager, and she's going to tell you what's going on in her department. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dr. Hopes. I'm Deanna Ward, the permitting section manager. We currently have 13 team members in the permitting section. We recognize ourselves as the gatekeepers of permits. We are the first and last to touch the permits for intake and issuance, as well as maintain a high level of customer service. We also follow Florida Building Code and Florida statutes. We manage cashiering and take phone calls, as well as attend the trade shows and events. As you can see on this slide, we have had an increase of 29% in the permits applied for between 2020 and 2022.
With our, could I say, sorry?
Yes.
And why that's important too is that, you know, I think we see, okay, is this a blip in the economy, right? And I think our consultant's going to talk about this too and what they're seeing in the industry. But Manatee County is still doing really, really well. Our building is, and construction industries are very strong. And so I think that's going to continue on. And we've seen that month to month. We do track these metrics monthly, and we try to see, okay, if there's a blip, do we need to adjust our processes? Do we need to, keep some vacancies when people, depart? And so we're working that on a monthly basis and constantly just making adjustments as needed. So I think that's an important point, but staff tracks these very closely.
Thank you. With our emerging technology, as Bill Palmer stated, we have an upcoming launch in spring of 2023 of our Open Counter project. This project will be available to citizens and contractors on our website to assist in answering questions on permits such as, do I need a permit? What kind of permit? What documents will I need to apply? And how much will it cost me? Our goal is consistency and transparency, as well as a reduction on the incoming calls that we currently receive each day. And as you can see on the slide, currently it's between 250 and 300 a day. And with that,
Yeah, and I think one of the things also that we get from the citizens or just from folks in general is they call and they'll say, well, so-and-so told me this, but then I called back and someone else told me something different. And so this is going to really help reduce those issues because it's one system where it's built on our land development code, our comp plan, and the Florida Building Code, and it walks you through a series of questions. And then after you answer those questions, it's not a loss of time because it pre-populates the application for you. So now the information that you've put in is in the system, and we have a record of that. And so I think this is really going to help with cutting down any issues that we have in the future, but then also reducing the number of calls that we're taking so folks can actually, process permits where it might take 3 hours to process a permit. Now it might take 2 hours because they're able to focus more on permits and not taking those calls. So anyway, thank you, Deanna.
thank you. Now I'm going to introduce Jessica Remkowitz, who's the flood section manager.
And so while Jessica comes up here, Jessica took over for Sandy Tudor, who retired after quite some time, and she's done an exceptional job, as has Deanna and the rest of the team. And so with that, I'll have her tell you a little bit about floodplain.
Good morning. My name is Jessica, and I'm the floodplain section manager. I have my department has a crew of 5 people. I have three floodplain review specialists, 1 floodplain management coordinator, and 1 floodplain section manager. What we do in my department, or in the floodplain management department, is we review for all the more federal regulation codes, such as FEMA codes, the Code of Federal Regulations, which is the CFR 44. We review technical bulletins. We understand and are part of the Manatee County Floodplain Ordinance, which all ties into our community rating and the National Flood Insurance Program. When we follow all these codes, along with holding hands with the Florida Building Code, we can build a structure that is safe, resilient, and sustainable. Because if the building stays and can be resilient against flood events, it's sustainable, and we don't have to rebuild, and we don't have, we have happy, yeah. So then, oops. Okay. So everything we do basically in the flood department is tied into our CRS rating, which we are class 5, which means we get 25% off all flood insurance policies, which is subsidized by FEMA. So you can see I have put a comparison up with the other counties that are in this area, and we're pretty much right on track with Sarasota County. We're kind of running head and head with them, but you can see like Longboat Key is a class 6, and they only get 20% off their flood insurance policies. The city of Bradenton is a class 7 because they are a separate jurisdiction, and Holmes Beach is a class 6. So we're doing pretty good for all our activities. The flood department we maintain lots of the different types of activities, like controlling the final elevation certificates, public outreach. We review the plans to make sure that all the previous regulations are followed. And with that,
One thing here that I could add to with the numbers. So as you can see, we have 17,887 policies in Manatee County. So that's how many flood policies that that are written in Manatee County. And of that, the CRS discount that is associated is almost $2.5 million. And so, as you can see, our staff is constantly striving to get a lower class, because if you go to a class 4, for example, we could then issue a 30% discount to our residents. And so we're going to continue to strive to do things. But when you see changes in floodplain, all of those changes are in alignment with us striving to get a better CRS rating.
Yes.
And so that's sort of,
Yes.
what guides our decision making in floodplain.
Yeah, that's our purpose there, is to work on our class discounts. Anyway, so I think that's all, and I would like to introduce Stephanie Charles, who is the manager of the License and Inspection Division. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, Dr. Hopes. My name is Stephanie Charles, and I am the Inspections Administration Manager and Licensing Manager. I currently oversee both divisions, and we currently have 7 full-time team members. Each division strives to provide the best customer service by maintaining positive attitude, knowing our permitting and inspection systems, and quickly responding to customers' needs and finding solutions that work. In the licensing division, we maintain state certified, registered, and local license files. There are currently 9,401 active state certified, registered, and local contractors in Manatee County, unincorporated Manatee County, with 1,120 registering this last fiscal year, and that is a 14% increase from fiscal year 21. We manage construction trades board cases against contractors that violate local ordinance and state statute. We also provide community outreach and resources to citizens and contractors. This includes resources to local organizations, HOAs, and community events such as trade shows and expos. We also participate in monthly activity meetings with neighboring counties, unlicensed activity meetings, in an effort to collaborate against unlicensed activity in the local jurisdictions. In the Inspection Admin Division, we issue certificate of occupancies, certificate of completions, and temporary certificate of occupancies. We assist county inspectors, private providers, contractors, and citizens with various inspection needs, from inspection compliance to closure requirements. During the last fiscal year, the Inspections Admin Division used technology to optimize current business process by creating a registration and inspection portal for private providers. Private providers are now able to register their license, schedule inspections, and result inspections directly from their online account. This new process helped reduce the CO and CC turnaround time from 5 to 7 working days to 1 to 2 working days. We were able to reduce our temporary employees from 3 to 0. Staff issued 5,162 certificate of occupancies this past fiscal year within 1 to 2 working days of the initial request, which is an 18% increase over the last fiscal year. So COs are the certificate of occupancies, and CCs are certificate of completions. So COs are issued on brand new houses and brand new businesses that never were here before. So over the last fiscal year, we've had an 18% increase, and with that reduction in review time, we were able to get new home buyers into their houses quicker and new businesses open quicker as well.
And that's one of the things I wanted to show on this thank you so much. COs are with the new homes, and so when you see that uptick, that's what we would expect with all of the other increases that we saw. CCs are not a good measure of the strength of the building industry, because you can get multiple CCs on a project. It's more on renovation, correct?
Correct. So certificate of completions are for like your electrical panel upgrade or your door and window change outs. And with supply demands and staff shortages, certificate of completions can be reduced because people aren't closing their permits as quickly because the projects are delayed. So COs are what's really important, because those are new residents to Manatee County, new home buyers, and that gets people in their houses and keeps the flow of business in Manatee County. Okay, with that, I'm going to call Samuel Acosta. He is the Plans Review Manager.
Morning, Commissioners, Dr. Hope, and Mr. Pope. My name's Sam Acosta. I manage 10 team members who review construction documents for Florida Building Code compliance of building, plumbing, and mechanical systems. The technology Manatee County has implemented since I've been here has been just indispensable for keeping up with the demand, not only in the changing the volume of work, but also the method of document submittal. Going to electronic submittal not only makes it easier, it flat makes it possible. We would not be able to do this with the same amount of staff members. Structures built with the intent of the Florida Building Code perform amazingly well when subject to natural disasters. That's a little graph of the percentage of increase for my staff's task. From 2021 to 2022, that's about a 14% increase with the same amount of staff. Actually, I was short one member for about a year during that time frame. This here is the picture of the upper shelf. That's the volumes that consisted of the Florida Building Code when it was adopted March 1, 2001, and that is what it has grown to in today's edition. The codes you see down there, the residential on the bottom shelf, residential, existing building, energy, conservation, and accessibility, those weren't added to the code. Those were all contained in the upper code named building. All of those sections were just sections, all of those volumes were just sections in that original code. So that's what it's grown into quite a bit. This is an example of a home that performs really well. That was Hurricane Michael, 2018. That was the Category 5. First one since Andrew. And you can see that home in the front, that 3-story, that's actually built to velocity zone standards, meaning that it has to withstand wave impact loads. And you can see it did pretty well there. That's pretty much it. I'm going to introduce Jeff Johnson in charge of inspections here. All right, thank you.
So Jeff also was promoted since the last time we came in front of the board, and so Jeff Johnson now manages our inspection section under Bill.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Dr. Phillips. My team consists of 5 seniors, 24 inspectors, and we average about 700 to 800 inspections a day. And also we have on call 24/7, all of them that take home trucks, they rotate, so they're on call for any vehicles versus buildings, fires, etc. We also assist in the code enhancement and code enforcement with unsafe structures, stop work orders. And then in any storms that we have, we do all the damage assessments, assist with code enforcement as well. And that's hurricanes or storm-related damages. For us to get all our inspections done, this leveraging technology has helped out unbelievably. We have Atlas, which actually sorts the inspectors to the next closest inspection. So they're not trying to find their way around, trying to, with all this traffic down here, trying to get to the next, they go to the next closest one. Then we have also, which helped us out significantly with the increase of inspections, was mechanical videos and the roof. It's a virtual roof replacement. So people that are having their roofs replaced, it's a video that you can go right up on the roof. The inspector doesn't have to go out there. It's right on the computer screen. We walk through that inspection. And then we have Now, which is available, which is View Specs. And oops. Yes, we completed in 2021 174,000 plus inspections. And in 2022, we went to 189,000 inspections. And that was an increase of over 15,000 inspections within 1 year. So that's where the virtual and the video inspections really helped us out.
And so you'll see too, that was one of the reasons too with our fees and the study is that we looked at potentially bringing to you a possible discount that we could offer for virtual inspections, because virtual inspections is truly the way that we're going to be able to do more with less. And so incentivizing that for developers and builders to use that is going to be critical for us. So now, I'm gonna talk about-
Okay, and this is the postcard that went out to the public contractors, and you can see all the added inspections that went on there just besides the roofs and the mechanical. And that's quite a bit. That'll really help us out. It's new, and from what I'm understanding right now from the inspectors out there, this is working great because homeowners aren't having to wait at home for us. They can do the inspection right then and there, virtual, and we're saving time and money, so we're not having to drive out to these inspections.
And our staff, I know Lacey's in the back with business services, but they're constantly trying to figure out other types of inspections that we can do virtually. So her team is challenged with that to try to grow this program even more. But for the community and the builders and the folks that are actually doing the work, to continue to let us know when you're having issues, because that's how we find out about any issues that we've got or tweaks that we need to make. And so we've really been working hand in hand with the community. We're going to show a quick video here. And I apologize, but it's not really working in the slideshow. And this is what we kind of put out. The team did a great job here with this video that we had put out. So let me start this.
As a homeowner, you know the hassle of getting work done on your home and having to be present for an inspection that may end up happening a few days after the work is complete. That's why Manatee County Development Services is pleased to introduce ViewSpecs, a tool that provides virtual inspection services to contractors remotely with the use of a smartphone or tablet. With ViewSpecs, you can now have your inspection done live on the same day the job is complete. As a homeowner, this will save you from taking additional time off of work and the inconvenience of having to coordinate schedules between contractors and inspectors. Request that your contractor use ViewSpecs and save time and money on your next home improvement project.
So I know this is about building department, but I got to say, Casey is like the jack of all trades. He's like setting up the
Casey
room,
is so good.
the studio. He shoots your video and critiques you. He shoots his own videos. Like this guy's awesome.
And his voice is so, it's great. He did a great job.
He's just got it. So before you go forward, while we have the inspection folks, first of all, I think everybody on the board loves video inspections, just like you guys do. We love where this is going. Love that it gets our people off the road, saves us money. It's more convenient for the customer. We love all those things. So you say we're constantly looking for other video inspections. What is the future of that? I mean, where are we going with this? What are the other potential video inspections?
What we're trying to do is first is this mic on? Okay. The inspectors got together and we went through a series of inspections, and we, took a look at the criteria of what we need to inspect with each one and what we think we'd be able to inspect by just seeing a video. So we'll go through those inspections, and then if we could add more to it, it'll be a trial and error. So if we can do 100% inspection with the video, then we'll add that to the list. So that's good.
Okay.
We also have a process too where Lacey's team, we test all these out first to make sure, are they feasible? Are we getting what we need? And I thought what was really interesting is we did one of these before, and Bill had said he actually sees a higher passing rate with the virtual. And I said, oh, well, is that because people are cheating the system? Well, no, it's because when they realize they have to take a video of something that's wrong, they fix it right there on the spot. Instead of bringing an inspector out the next day, now it's wrong, now they have to fix it, and they just got a failed inspection. And so I think it also enables contractors to fix things right there, convenience for everyone.
Yep. I think it was a 20% difference in the pass rate, as I recall, from when we did the AC change-out inspections.
That is, so I know a building inspector that works here, and he told me that is accurate, that because when the customer has to go through the checklist themselves,
exactly,
they catch it themselves, fix it before they ever submit the video. Plus it eliminates the contractor or the homeowner wants to get in the good graces of the inspector, so they're always trying to chit-chat them on the way in and out the door, and it eliminates all of that, right? And so they're able to knock out 10 times more inspections by doing it video, and the quality of the work tends to be better with a higher pass rate. Commissioner Ron, you're on the board, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. We do appreciate our building department, believe me, as a past president of the Manatee Sarasota Building Industry Association. We do appreciate all the hard work you guys do. Two quick questions.
you.
One, do you think you see pools being added to ViewSpec?
Yeah, I don't see why pools couldn't be added to view spec. That's something we'll look at.
I would add this though too with pools because that's a double-edged sword. So about how many of our inspections do we actually do the inspections for? And this would be it would be good if we could add, because right now I think private providers do about 90% of our pools. And so that would impact, because then maybe those builders would come to us instead of private provider. So right now we don't do that many pool inspections ourselves.
Okay. Also, then, thank you. Then overall turn times. Well, now you have ViewSpec in place. How do you think that's going to affect your overall turn times on inspections in general? I mean, is it going to go for our overall turn time now is 5 days. Now with ViewSpec, it's going to go to 3, or where do you think that's going to impact the overall turn times on inspections?
Right now, we're really not 5 days out. Our goal is usually to do next day inspections. Occasionally, we need to roll over some. But with the ViewSpec inspections, I mean, that would definitely decrease those times, because we can do those inspections in the office and at at different times than having an inspector out in the field that has to be taken up in the field, doing inspections.
Virtual gives us so many possibilities
Yeah.
too, because you've got someone that has, let's just say, has injured themselves and is on light duty. The inspector can now do virtual inspections.
Yeah.
So it just opens up, it gives us more flexibility. And so, yes, we can absolutely be more productive, whereas regularly that inspector might be down. And so I think it just opens up a whole new realm of possibilities.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else?
That's it.
Oh, Commissioner Bearden.
I appreciate the building department continuing to strive to cut costs and really operating with the personnel that you currently have, and looking at not having to add any more people unless you absolutely need to do so. And doing this while also increasing services is phenomenal to me. Utilizing technology to improve the services as well as cutting costs, and striving to continue to grow as we as a county grow. I mean, this is amazing to me. It's awesome to see you guys utilizing technology to really increase services. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, Courtney and staff, this is fantastic. Maybe I missed it in the presentation, so please forgive me, but are there other counties that are doing inspections this way as well? Maybe I missed it.
View specs?
Yes.
I'm sure there are. I really don't know off the top of my head who's doing it and who isn't, but there probably are counties doing it. Maybe Lacey can answer that
Yeah,
question.
I'm having Lacey come up. She's our guru on this. So I just wanted to say overall, and I appreciate everyone's kind words. Thank you so much. I think staff has been working really, really hard. And I think, we really are, when you talked about the goals in the building department, I mean, efficiency, effectiveness, communication, transparency, consistency, all are at the forefront of every decision that we make. And that goes hand in hand with business services also and the support that they've offered. But Lacey and her team understand our goals, and they are introducing programs to us that are in alignment with those goals and the commission's goals. And so anyway, do you know of anyone else?
Yes. Lacey Pritchard, Business Services Manager, Pasco County.
Pasco, of course.
Hillsborough County.
Yeah.
Polk County. So in Sarasota, we'll be also utilizing it when they go live with Acela. So we're super excited. I will tell you that we challenged ViewSpec, and they did design a special feature for us that handles our scheduling, so it does not adhere to any of our staff time to do scheduling. So we're pretty excited about that. So that was one of the things. We also challenge our vendors and ask them to meet our needs, and they usually do. So
Excellent. And the reason I ask is because it does expedite the inspection just so much that I was thinking that it might be good to contact the Florida Association of Counties. You guys could give a great presentation of this in the very near future at their, George, when is their next? I know the legislative conference is coming up, but is there in March? Okay. Just thinking that it might be something that could help the entire state. So congratulations. Good job.
Thank you. And we already have put ourselves on the agenda for the March Florida user group for Acela that we meet with all of the other users, and we're going to be showcasing this new technology and a lot, especially our scheduling feature in it.
Yeah, I like that. Manatee first. Yes.
And one more thing
go,
for
guys.
Lacey. Lacey, so at the Hurricane Conference, is going to be doing 2 presentations on Crisis Track. So that was that great system that our inspectors did, as well as code enforcement and code enhancement, and to do damage assessments after Hurricane Ian. And so it was so successful, and we reported so quickly to the state that we're partnering with Florida Department of Emergency Management to do that presentation at the Hurricane Conference. And so Lacey's going to be taking that on. So we're really lucky to have her as a member of our team and
Fantastic.
staff.
Building
So,
department is
yeah.
moving on.
So.
Thank you, guys.
Just one last question. I don't know, either of you can answer this, but has the number of inspections monthly, what is the trend right now?
But right now, I mean, the inspections have been increasing each month.
Volume is going up?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it
Permits,
hasn't really.
yeah,
700
inspections
to
are
800 a day.
consistent.
Yeah.
But I also think the one thing that we're seeing is permits issued has gone down slightly, which we expected from 21 and 22 numbers.
Sure.
But it has not gone below pre-COVID. So we are
Okay.
still above, and I think that's really when we talk about, I think when we talked that one economic outcast we saw at the EDC meeting, which was great, they showcased that Manatee County is a very strong economy still. And so we're seeing that in the numbers. And so while we try to make, we call this kind of a blip, we make little adjustments through attrition, we feel confidently that that's how we can handle it, at least for now. We haven't seen anything besides that.
No.
As a matter of fact, we're starting to plus up because we've seen permits. We track this constantly, but we've seen permits, now it's going from a 1-day review time to a 2 or 3 day review time. Okay, now we need to fill some vacancies. And so we're constantly tracking that to make sure that we're making adjustments.
And these are vacancies that we already had. These aren't new vacancies.
Yeah, they're not those new positions. We're still not going to fill those. So anyway, all right.
So anyway, thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we look forward to your support in building the building department. Thank you.
And so with that, I am going to introduce our consultant, MGK Consulting. And I don't know, Lacey, should we get up? Do you want to take a break? Lacey, can we get up the presentation? Is it up there? Let's see here. Oh, never mind. I've got it. I'm good. Okay. So we've got, MGT Consulting, apologize for that, here with us, Bruce and Brett. And they're going to be talking about what they saw with our fee schedule. And just, I wanted to give a quick little intro and some history before I have them come up. So I think the public is aware of this, and for the new commissioners, back in 2018, we cut 30% off of all of our building fees. And that was when the Florida statute came out that we could only carry over the average of the last 4 years, the average of 1 year's operating expenses over the past 4 years. And so that number is a little bit over 10 million, and Bruce will go into that in his slideshow. At that time, we were over, I think, 18 million. And so we knew that former leadership knew that they had to bleed that reserve fund. And the reserve is the rainy day fund, and he'll talk about that as well. We did that. And so 30% cut across the board. And so what we're coming forward with you all today is a discussion on the reinstatement of building fees, and not all of them, but some of them, to meet the cost. So now we will not have to be dipping into the reserves to subsidize our day-to-day operating costs. And so the proposal is to capture in fees the cost that we're spending on a daily basis. So we are not a revenue generating activity. We solely try to get fees and recoup the costs that we're spending. So in any case, with that, I'll bring Bruce and Brett up here, and they'll go through the history and show you all some numbers. And you all should have packets. There is a comparison chart for you all, which compares the existing rate with the proposed potential rate, which is obviously subject to discussion here. And then after the work session today, we will be going to the industry. We have a joint industry briefing scheduled for next Thursday with the Building Industry Association, and I know that they're here as well today, with Gulf Coast Builders Exchange and MACA to try to get this out to as many people as possible. And so with that.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Bruce Cowens with MGT. When you want to operate a car safely, you have to use both the accelerator and the brake. And I think that's a concept you should keep in mind in discussing fees. Sometimes you need to speed up, sometimes you need to slow down. The county had accumulated a large fund balance because construction is a booming business and the volume of permits sold generated more revenue than was necessary to break even. And the county decided, wisely I think, to use the fund balance. It consciously, purposely sold permits below cost and used the fund balance to make up the difference. Until today, where the fund balance has been diminished and we're talking about reinstating the former prices in order to get the fund balance to a more sustainable level. Let's see. Oh, okay. All right, good. Nobody has a crystal ball. We really never know how many permits are going to need to be processed. We certainly want the industry to do well, and you need to have development for your local economy to be healthy. But just because of the surge of development at the prices that were in effect at the time, unintentionally, the county overdid it. So it has asked for a fee study to say, where do we need to be on prices? The industry remains very robust, even though due to some changes in interest rates, there may have been a temporary stutter in some places. We've done work all over Florida, all over the country, but all over Florida. And I asked Hillsborough County recently, what are you seeing? And they said, activity is down from the prior year, but it's still at a level that's way above what we're scaled to handle. So, and we're happy that the industry is still strong, but it just goes to the lack of a crystal ball and the need to make periodic adjustments based on what you're seeing in the industry. Many other counties around here are doing fee studies. We have done them recently for Hillsborough and Pasco. Those studies are completed. They've not been presented to the public yet. I can't reveal what the numbers are, but you are not alone in facing the same economic conditions around Tampa Bay, or nationally even, and having to make some adjustments about it. The blue line that you see in this graph is the trend line on the fund balance, and it was up over $15 million in 2018 when the county decided wisely to put a temporary discount on fees and use fund balance to make up the difference between what it cost to do the work and how much the fee revenue was bringing in. It worked. Great. It's now worked so well that we need to, it's like I said earlier, when you drive safely, you use both accelerator and brake. You tapped on the brakes, it worked. It might be time to hit the accelerator again. So that would be the goal here, is to come up with what level of pricing on permits would enable the county to break even and or have an appropriate level of fund balance. We think of fees as different than taxes. There is, in some people's mind, the thought that anytime you charge anybody for anything, it's a tax. In public finance, a tax is something people pay without any connection to how much service they personally get. We tax income, we tax property, et cetera, but how much you pay in taxes does not entitle you to a given level of service. But when there is a fee, you're buying a service. And so the technical question in one of these studies is, what is the price that pays for the service? Not more, not less. You then have to decide, once you know what that number is, where you want to set the price. But the consultant's job in this case was to determine what are the costs of issuing the various kinds of permits. I'm not going to read all this, nor will there be a test on it, but I wanted to make the point that setting fees in Florida is governed by statute. The state has adopted the Florida Building Code and other related construction codes, and it has passed a law that says you may charge cost for your permits. You don't have to charge cost. You may charge less if you can afford it. That's hard to do over the long haul, but you have to do this work. It's a regulated industry by state law. You are allowed to charge for it. I'm going to step aside now and let Brett Swendig continue the presentation, and we will go back and forth a couple times.
All right. Guess you can give me a signal if my voice isn't carrying through this, and I'm a little taller than this microphone. Arrow. Okay. So want to start off with just a little bit of a flavor of what we look for in our analysis to give you, an actual example as I talk through the purpose and scope here in a second. But basically what we're doing is we're looking at fees at an individual level. If we come up with, in this case, a $1,000 cost for a fee of providing that service, plan review and inspection, but you're only charging $600, there's going to be a $400 shortfall. So the next step of what we're doing is trying to figure out, what's the best way to recover that cost. As you see here, there's a few different examples of using tax revenue. The taxpayer funds that shortfall, $400 out of the fund balance. Again, that's what we're seeing right now as far as depleting fund balance. I think Monroe County is the one using the third option, which is rationing the services based on a lottery system, or as we're looking to do here, set the prices based on reinstating the former temporary discounts or the current fees. Just a little bit of principles of fee analysis. We typically say prices should recover the cost. There's going to be a lot of scenarios where maybe that does not make sense. In the case here, again, we're looking more at just reinstating prior levels. There might also be some policy considerations, or maybe the market wouldn't bear certain costs. There's, again, we kind of start from that, okay, what's full cost, and then we work from there. And I will say too, want to highlight, the Manatee County will be validating these on a regular basis, again, to make sure that, the fees continue to be reasonable and fair to the community.
And so I joke that staff has gotten like a PhD in building fees, but I feel like we've learned so much over the past year of going through iterations of this and understanding it. We are committed in building and development to make sure that we're looking at this data annually. FMD was incredibly supportive with Sheila and Danielle, and now Angie started yesterday with getting a report that shows us our profit and loss on a monthly basis, so we can make adjustments. If we see that we're bringing in profit every month into our reserves and adding to our balance, then we know that, okay, we need to look at throttling back now and offering another discount of some sort. And so we're going to be looking at that annually. And I don't know that we don't need a full-fledged consultant to do that for us. This is something that we're going to be looking at on a regular basis, even monthly, really. And staff can handle that internally, and then maybe every 5 to 7 years we do a full-fledged study by an independent consultant, just to make sure that we're doing all the right things. But that's our pledge, and we had expressed that to MGT. So,
thank you. And so, to arrive at our recommendations, just a brief explanation on the scope. What we were tasked with was you look at an in-depth analysis of each individual fee. So we're looking through at every fee in the fee schedule, talking with staff, how they're providing the service, and we're coming up with those costs because we want to make sure that those are consistent and fair to the community. And then hopefully by going through this process here, we're very transparent in the process and how we're calculating out the cost. And then, I guess the last bullet, insurance fees are dedicated exclusively to the related services. Again, it was an in-depth analysis. We're seeing a lot of overview here. We looked at every individual fee to make sure, we're calculating those appropriately. So this slide here kind of explains or kind of talks to our experience a little bit. Like mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of these studies here in Florida, and we kind of want to highlight that. You see that second bullet there. We typically see, in aggregate, the hourly rate of staff and operating these departments is between $60 and $150 per hour. Manatee County's is $73.22 is what we came up with. So that's, more or less at the lower end of what we see, which I think, again, especially here in the presentation earlier, seems like, you're operating pretty lean, and also they're doing a pretty good job of providing these services out here. And again, we typically, I would say, see over $100 an hour most of the time when we do these studies. Study findings, again, as mentioned earlier, the county, based on those temporary discounts, reduced the fund balance as they were directed by the statute, came down. Now we're in the other direction as far as we're seeing a depleting fund balance. So again, I think that's, turn it back to Bruce.
In the aggregate, we found that the county is recovering 63% of its costs, and for reinstatement is looking at increasing fees 30%. We had a discussion about whether it made sense to vary the reinstatement percentage by fee, and on Courtney's direction, that got really complicated, and it seemed easier to have a decision rule of a 30% reinstatement. One of the reasons we have to do this is a law passed in 2019 in Florida that says, okay, you can have a fund balance, but not too much. A lot of builders have gone to Tallahassee and said, look at the size of these fund balances. Why are we paying all these fees? And they had an excellent point. So the state passed a law that said, yes, you may have fund balance, but up to the average appropriation of the last 4 years. And you would have been in violation of that. However, you are not now, and that's the reason for this discussion. You need to monitor that on an ongoing basis. You are. Our finding is you're doing it right. But all local governments in Florida that have a building fund need to monitor it to make sure that the fund balance complies with the law to say you can have a balance, but let's be reasonable about it.
Could we go back 1 second? Because I do want to I had a conversation with Sheila last night because I was looking at a chart that she had put together for this, and I realized it was off by $1 million. And so I just want to highlight that. I don't know if Sheila's here, but the fund balance beginning of year and projected fund balance end of year, those are values that were based on what was budgeted that we thought we were going to have. We've now, since in the last few weeks, gotten final numbers. Yeah. And so the numbers actually for the fund balance beginning of the year is about $1.3 million less than what's shown. So we're actually around $6 million at the beginning of the year, and we're projected to have about $4 million at the end of the year. And so we have gotten the newer numbers, and I wanted to bring that to attention because the story's gotten a little bit, I don't want to say it's worse, but it has gotten a little worse. And so we're projected to have $4 million in our fund balance at the end of this year. So
that's really important. Nobody has a crystal ball, and conditions can change. But you're monitoring it, and hooray! I call that new information evidence of a process that works. One of the things that we care about in fees is that you got to regulate. You don't have any choice. The law says you have to, but you want to do it with a light hand. You cannot have a healthy local economy without development. It creates jobs. It creates housing. If you don't have any development, the buildings in the county will depreciate, lose value, jobs will go away, people will go away. It's very important that you have development. So in fulfilling your duties, one of the things we monitor is what are you doing to the return on investment for a developer? And on that point, we rely on information that comes from a study done every other year by the National Association of Home Builders. And they found this for many years, that the building permits are about 1.5%, in this case 1.7% in the latest study of the cost of building a house. We ran your numbers against that same scheme, and we found you're at a little over 0.4%. So if I'm a builder and you reinstate fees, do I like it? No, I do not like it. But is the sky falling? I don't think so. It would be hard for me to imagine that a charge that was a fraction of a percent, well, it may be unwelcome to the industry, and I'm sure that it is. It doesn't seem to be enough to kill the incentive to continue to develop here. And we need to keep that in mind because you would not want to damage the industry. I'm going to hand this back at this point to Brett, who did the peer comparison. One of the things we look at is how do the prices we're talking about compare to what a builder would encounter if that builder were working elsewhere in the area?
Okay, I'm going to stop you real quick. Commissioner Ball has a question.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question, it's just a comment. I appreciate what you were just saying about the building industry. And I will tell you that I'm going to compliment Courtney DePaul on that because I know that she's worked very closely with our building industry to make sure that everything was good with them and that they understood where we were coming from, et cetera. She's done a great job with that, and it's one of the first times that that's really been done. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And the other thing is that, you know, I think sometimes people get the wrong impression of the building industry. You know, the building industry is one of the largest industries in the area. And the bottom line is they're all citizens of Manatee County or Sarasota County generally as well. And so they want what's best for the area too. You know, they're citizens just like all of us. So we all work together. And, you know, I just wanted that to be mentioned. And I know that they're all in agreement with this increase because we did have, I was here. I remember the $18 million. And I remember trying to get an explanation of that. And I got chided for it when I was trying to figure it out. I think Mike Runn probably recalls that. And, you know, so it's our way of showing that we're concerned for our citizens and for the industry as well. So we all work together.
Thank you. I was very happy to have the presentation that preceded ours because, and I got to tell you, doing a lot of these studies, this is not universal that that a client will pay that level of attention to the value of its services and the efficiency of its services. I would confess to having had clients that hired us to do a study that was compliant and mathematically accurate, but a good allocation of stupid numbers.
Well, you know, generally it's good to be one of the lowest in the region.
Yes.
That's a good thing that we can be very proud of. But in this instance, maybe not.
Well, maybe
you know,
not.
It's different.
But the staff shared with us the goal to be an attractive place for people to build and to live, and an understanding of its role in this process to facilitate that. In terms of, you know, do people really want to be regulated? No. But it wasn't Manatee County's choice. It was a result of the state adopting a building code, in part because if it did not, insurers said they were going to leave the state. And if you can't get insurance, you have a major economic problem. So this is just kind of a series of adjustments necessary for a sustainable, healthy economy.
And besides that, I like blaming the legislators. It's a good thing.
All right, so I'll run through these next few slides pretty quick here, but again, just wanted to highlight another key component of this, which was the peer comparison. And as we mentioned before, we've been doing a lot of studies here in Florida. I think I've done 5 or 6 in comparison studies in the last couple of years, and pretty much find that Manatee is on the lower end of all of those when we're doing those, again, even for other clients. So, I won't read all the numbers out, but again, you can see that from these comparisons. And then also to note what Bruce did earlier, Hillsborough and Pasco are also about to release their own study results as well. Policy recommendations that would come out of this, again, we recommend doing this, the cost of services regularly, not necessarily with the consultant. It can be done internally. I think the staff is pretty comfortable with our process and models at this point between all the back and forth. So again, wanted to make sure that these fees continue to be reasonable and fair, as moving forward. And then I would highlight too that last bullet there. If the revenue starts to grow faster again than expected, and that fund balance starts to get too high like it was, then they'll obviously start discussing again reductions again. Again, just wanted to highlight a couple of fees. There's a couple on here. I'm not sure if everybody got a handout of the full fee listing, but again, we did every individual fee, but wanted to kind of just, again, give you a flavor for what we're trying to do. We took a couple example projects put on here. Residential new construction, you'll see the current fee, based on the per square foot at cost of 21 cents with that, approximately 30% reinstatement up to 27 cents. You'll see that cost will go up 525 to 675. We did the same thing for commercial, 25 cent per square foot charge on a 40,000 square foot project. The price would go up from 10 grand to 13,200. All right.
The surge of building activity slowed down the process for many local governments of issuing permits. And in response, what happened was the evolution of a private provider industry, where the law says that you may use a third party for plan review, for inspection, or for both. And if the applicant uses a third party, there should be a discount to the fee to reflect the fact that the county should not be charging for costs it does not incur. The county will still have costs because you cannot apply to a private party for a permit. They can't issue a certificate of occupancy, and you have to review their work. But the county does a lot less work if there's a private provider. And so as part of the study, we calculated private provider discounts for plan review only, for inspection only, or for both. I love that presentation on view specs, and my read of the room was, I wasn't alone in that. Everybody thought that was just terrific. And that will entail a discount because to the extent there's at least not the travel time, it's going to save everybody money. Hooray. So that has been baked in here as well. So that, as we close the formal part of the presentation, what comes next? Well, first, talk to the industry. That's important. A lot of people have spent a lot of time with these numbers and tried very hard to have them be a good explanation of the way the work is done and what that costs. And many eyes have seen these numbers many times, but new eyes sometimes see things that we did not see. And so if the industry has comments on this, I'm confident that the county is open to hearing what those are. When that dust settles, the next thing is for the county commission to decide what to do. Staff is recommending that you reinstate the fees to the former level, but they're not empowered to make that happen. You are, and so they're asking for your action on that matter. And then finally, when that happens, there are website materials and application forms that need to be updated with the new numbers. And with that, that closes our formal presentation, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Bearden.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Great presentation. I recognized a term, rationing services. What exactly is that? Because it sounds like communism.
In Monroe County, where I did their fees, everybody would love to be able to build, put up big hotels, build houses everywhere. They can't support it. The reef on which they exist, they don't have enough land, they don't have enough water, they don't have the soil stability. And so who gets a building permit? Well, how do you do that fairly? What do they do in Monroe County? They have a lottery. You need to win the lottery to get a building permit. You have to come in with a pro forma set of plans, and you enter the lottery. And if you win the lottery, you can build. And I have never seen that anywhere else. I do this kind of work all over the country. I've never seen a lottery system before. But it evolves out of a sense that they couldn't give everybody everything they wanted, and it wouldn't be fair if they decided who got a permit and who didn't. So it's literally a random draw for who gets a permit.
The only place I've ever heard of a lottery system was Cuba.
Well, I don't want to follow anything they do.
Exactly.
Commissioner Cruz and then Commissioner Ballard.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with it. I've been pretty consistent. I think a lot of these departments that are non-revenue profit generating should support themselves. And I think the reason you're going to have a lot of people in the building industry support this is time's money. And if you have a slowdown in permitting, that's going to cost them more than what we're going to charge them to expedite that. I do have a question. Did we look at this as these are the permits we offer, these are the permits we have to go through, now let's figure out the price? Or did we assess the permits themselves and determine, here's where I'm going with it, like, You got that old saying, like, we lose money with every sale, but we make it up in volume. Like, we're losing, there's 50,000 permits approximately, I think you said, and about $5 million worth of shortfall. It's about $100 a permit we're losing every time we do a permit. One way to fix that shortfall is to increase the cost of a permit. Another way is to stop issuing permits and going through the time and the effort for permits that are just cost prohibitive or unnecessary. Do we assess? I mean, I'm going through our fee schedule. I know we're going to talk about, but as an example, I'm not saying what's correct, but it costs someone 33 cents a foot to build their own gazebo in their own backyard. It costs $173 to put your own deck in your backyard. $128 to change my garage door. $62 to change my air conditioning. $62 to remodel my tub. I mean, have we looked at? Are we nickel and diming residents that for permits that are above and beyond standard safety and now, because that's one way of handling it. I mean, if you take the same number of people on permitting and you say X percent of these permits that they're going through and wasting time on, are they really necessary? Is this government overreach and oversight for things that we're just trying to squeeze a few bucks here and there off of individuals so they can remodel their personal tub or put a tankless water heater in their own garage for $91 worth of permitting, which then takes a couple of people to assess that permit, go inspect that permit, or in this case now do virtual. Is there a way of just removing some of these onerous permitting requirements we put on our citizens that can then free up more people's time to make them more efficient and therefore cut some of this shortfall just by making our system more efficient and help citizens that don't have to keep paying money for essentially no reason?
I think the answer is yes, and kind of all of the above. There were some activities on the list that staff decided nobody'd use them in eons. Why do they have to stay on the list? There were other activities that were new that got added. And one in particular that I would call your attention, we looked at solar installations on roofs. And a solar roof, given the electricity that's involved in it, requires more inspection and would be more costly than a non-solar roof. And on a strict cost basis, you would be entitled to charge more for a solar roof. Yet, based on some feedback from the industry, and good feedback, I may say, if you want people to go solar, don't charge them more to do the right thing. So the decision at staff level was, even though it costs more to do that, we want to incentivize that behavior. Let's don't charge more for it.
But so you're saying this study wasn't just a cost per line item, but there was an actual study of the line items to determine the necessity of the line items in and of themselves. Instead of saying it goes from $48 to $62, did we assess whether or not that should go from $48 to zero by just not going through the effort of a permit?
I think a lot of that is defined by the Florida Building Code for what you are required to do. Within that list, there is some variety. If you've seen one local government fee schedule, you've seen one local government fee schedule. If you hold them up to the light, they all look different and charge for different things. And there's no real uniformity there for what gets charged for. So there was a lot of discussion at the staff level about the items on the list. Was it a comprehensive study of whether we need to do all of these things? Well, if building code says it needs to be reviewed, then the county doesn't have any latitude within that tent. We saw staff making changes.
I think also I'm going to call Bill Palmer up because he is the building official and has a lot of technical knowledge. I think, the rate consultant really focused on what it cost us to do each line item, like you were saying, Commissioner Cruz. And I think what is required for each item, I lean on Bill and, the licenses that he holds as a building official for those recommendations. And so.
Yes, Commissioner. As I had stated earlier, the state has mandated the Florida Building Code be regulated by every jurisdiction, and that's a Florida statute. So we looked at all of our permits, and there is no permit that we require that doesn't require regulation by the Florida Building Code. If there isn't a reason for it to be permitted and inspected, and we don't have a reason or regulation to inspect it, then we're not inspecting it. simplest things seem like a garage door. Well, we need to, check to make sure that it meets the proper wind pressures and the impact rating, so the envelope of the building is protected. So some of the times things seem simple, but they're really not. There's always a reason why we inspect it. And if there isn't a reason, in the Florida Building Code to inspect it, we won't permit it.
Okay, that answers my question. So we're comfortable that the permits we're issuing are the required permits and not nicety permits to waste our permit department's time and cost taxpayers money for.
Absolutely,
Okay.
sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ballard.
Oh, there we go. So I'm not sure if this is a question for our county attorney or possibly for staff. Probably county attorney. Is it possible to structure our resolution in a way that it automatically will adjust when the fund balance gets above what's needed for like 9 months or a year of reserves?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ballard, my initial answer is yes. That's something. I'm sorry. That is something that the board has the authority to do. I think you would have to still keep an eye on it to make sure we're staying within the parameters of the statute.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay, sir. I would ask Mrs. DePaul, Dr. Hopes isn't here, but I would ask her, Commissioner Cruz brought up some valid points about regulation and, government overreach. This industry certainly is the most heavily regulated industry at the county level. Would you agree?
County and possibly state level.
Okay. And, I had brought up at a previous meeting the potential of creating a committee for essentially regulation oversight and looking at areas where we could safely deregulate. This might be a good pilot. Your department might be a good pilot for such a committee. Just something to think about.
We've talked about also BOAF, which is the Building Official Association of Florida. They have a group of folks that lobby in Tallahassee. And, I've sent some information to Bill because I think it's really important that our staff is involved with what things are going there. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I'll give an example because we hear it all the time at every place we go, is split unit AC systems in garages and requiring energy calculations for them. And I think there's ways that we go back and forth on that about what they're required, but every jurisdiction does them a little differently. And so I think when it comes to things like that, streamlining is best for everyone. And, I think when I got here, one of the things that Bill and I had worked on was our hope is that, and why BOAF exists, is that so all the builders in Florida have similar restrictions and regulations. So when they work in one county versus another, it's very similar. They know what to expect. And so I know BOAF is really working really hard on that. And so I think it would be really important to partner with them also to try to get some of these things deregulated. But a lot of things that we're bound is by the Florida Building Code.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you and I follow up later and talk about how a committee could be structured and formed, obviously, with you on it and probably a couple members of your staff on it, but I would like to blend it with members of the public as well. Certainly the chamber, needs to be included. And then possibly we need to look at industry leaders as well, from sort of all aspects of the industries. I would be thinking you need to talk to have an HVAC person in there and, so on and so forth.
May I make a suggestion on that?
Sure.
We, as
That's
a
why you're
firm,
here.
we do
You're
a
the
lot
suggestion
of
guy.
a lot of management consulting work. I mean, not just setting fees, but how do you do it better, faster, more reliably? And there's two approaches to doing this. One is to sort of study everything, which is possible, but it's rather time-consuming. And the other is to do an initial check-in with people about where are the real headaches in getting a permit, and drill down on those. So that just as an option, maybe to focus your time and attention, it may be worth doing just a high-level exchange with the industry about when we return an application to you for revision or when an inspection fails. Are there circumstances where you see that more often? because that puts us on the trail of the things where fixing it will do the most good. So you might want to think about that if you want to go down that path. I think it's a healthy thing for any regulatory process to ask the question periodically, is all this really necessary?
Yeah, that is the fundamental question, isn't it? Right. Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
All
all
right.
we had.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the next step, and I can come up, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and close this portion out, then we'll take a recess. It's 10:19, 10:20, and then we'll come back.
So the next step for us is next Thursday, we'll be doing a joint industry engagement. It's a virtual meeting with BIA, Gulf Coast Builders Exchange, and with MACA, which is the Minnesota Air Conditioning and Contractors Association. I hope I said that right. Anyway, we've tried to get as comprehensive as a sampling as possible with their members to understand, okay, if this fee, we want to make sure our fees are going to be tolerated by the industry. Obviously, you know, when someone said to me, Manatee County, we want it to be the best place to live, work, play, and worship. And I like that. But that's really what we're striving to do. And I believe that's going to help us meet the goal of the board. So in any case, that's all we had. And I guess we have the next section after the recess.
We do. I'm going to go ahead and open up this section to public comment, almost sort of treating this like a regular meeting. And I think since we only have three agenda items, and there are people here to representing to see each of these three. After each agenda item, we'll go ahead and open public comment. So at this time, we'll open public comment for agenda item 1, which is development services review and fee changes. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward to speak on the first agenda item that we have covered so far in today's meeting? Sir, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is David Ballard. Live in Manatee County, District 2. I work for the BIA. I do our government affairs and membership relations. I'm also on the Manatee County Construction Trades Board. First thing I'd like to do is to thank Courtney and her staff for involving the industry in looking at permit fees. The BIA is cautiously supportive of the adjustment of these fees. We understand the need to have workflow that is appropriate for the industry and to not be onerous upon Courtney's staff. The other thing we're also very supportive of is initiating the technology advances that it takes to really make those changes and to make their lives easier. So across the board, we are supportive and we appreciate the input between us, our members, and the other associations in our region that are involved within the building industry. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions for me, I'm more than open to it.
Thank you, sir. We don't dialogue during public
Yes, sir.
comment, but we appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak for public comment?
Thank you. Andrew Griffin, Manatee activist. So mine are more geared toward the residents of this county. I like the idea of the app. I don't really like the response we got related to the pools because of the private providers. I think we need to be looking for private providers that can work within the app to do those inspections, because at the end of the day, it's about the client, not the providers. How much this is saving, and will this be realized in tax advantages for the residents of this county? Obviously, we had an overage of fees. That's why we're in this situation. So putting those fees back to those prior levels, we're going to have the same issue in a few more years where we collected entirely too much money. So we probably need to look at that to find out what a happy medium is between that, so we're not having to deal with this lowering and increasing every few years. So I'd like to see that happen as well. And I disagree with some of the permitting things, because here in Manatee County, you're not required to pull a permit if you're replacing a fence with the same kind of material. You're only required to pull a permit for a fence if it's changing material. What's the purpose? I mean, if you can install a fence on the 4x4 post, whether it's wood or vinyl, what difference does it make? Literally, what difference does it make? So I believe that those types of fees need to be looked at as well for replacement items, because I'm dealing with a lot of people out in Palmetto Point that are dealing with just that and having inspectors up their butt right now demanding money for permits that they don't have, because they were told by a lot of the fence builders no permit was required. So what's happening to the residents out there in Palmetto Point that are now faced, there's several of them, that are now faced with having to pull permits after the fact, some 5 and 6 years after the fact. So I've got a problem with that. So I'd like to hear some information related to that. And I think that's it for my notes. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak on what we've covered so far in the workshop? Okay. Seeing no one, we're going to recess this meeting for 10 minutes, and we'll return at 10:34. We're in recess.
So you think we'll come up before lunch, or? I don't know how much of a discussion this next thing is going to be.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're moving our way through our work session here today, and next on the agenda is the review and discussion of the revised American Rescue Plan, ARP, proposed project list. Madam CFO.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, County Attorney. I thought he was here too. It's a brand new day. We are today going to be presenting to you more information about the American Rescue Plan, and since we have a lot of new folks into the Commission, we felt like it was necessary that we could give you a background of what has happened with the American Rescue Plan, what this American Rescue Plan is, and the guidance that is behind it, and all that has transpired from the moment that we received it a year ago. We all learned a lot of lessons from CARES, a lot of guidance changes from Treasury, a lot of regulations that were moving at a fast pace. And with that, we came back once we got the American Rescue Plan Act after the CARES, and we decided this is the time that we're gonna pace ourselves, take a step back and analyze and see what are the actual initiatives that we can do with of course the guideline of Treasury. For that reason, we decided, and Administration and Financial Management, to designate a single one-source person to identify and discuss with each one of the departments, the Commission, the Administrator, and look at the initiatives and compare them to all the regulations that Treasury has brought forward. What is necessary, what is allowed, what's not allowed, and of course, the most important part, what is the reporting that is required behind all this, so that we can meet and all the requirements of the federal government. This person has been for the last 9 months a very, very important part of the American Rescue Plan movement, and that's what I call it. His name is William Constanzo, and he stands right here next to me. He has been the key to the success so far of American Rescue Plan, inclusive with the initiator right here with Hunter Foxwell. He's my deputy director. They both kind of like seeded, defined the rules, seek all the changes that has happened, because Treasury has moved American Rescue Plan to an all new beginning. And we will be discussing all of this. And without any further ado, I will leave you with William Constanzo, who will initiate the discussion with American Rescue Plan.
Thank you, Sheila. Commissioners, Dr. Hopes, Sheila, colleagues, I'd like to speak today about the American Rescue Plan, and in particular, the state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is a component of the ARP. So we'll be using those interchangeably today. Today, I'd like to give a brief history for our new commissioners and new people listening of where the county has gone with the rescue plan, as well as truly understanding what is the driving forces behind this legislation. And then we have a new beginning, and that has to do with something you'll hear quite a bit today, something called revenue loss provisions, and that's a component of the SLFRF guidance. And then where we are today with our current projects and proposed future for the American Rescue Plan. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Ready? So the brief history of the plan. Back in March of 2021, the ARP established the SLFRF, and it was designed to respond to the pandemic and its negative impact and to build a stronger, more equitable economy. In April, the county immediately engaged Ernst & Young Consulting. We'll refer to them throughout today's presentation. And then in May, Treasury published its interim final rule and initial guidance. The former deputy administrator addressed the board, and this board also approved the ARP agreement. And then the first tranche of $39 million came in May of 21, and then the second tranche was received 1 year later for the full $78 million. Throughout the summer and fall of 2021, the county used its extensive network of departments, other agencies in the community, and other stakeholders to develop and solicit ideas for for projects, and to receive feedback from the community that is required by the guidance. We developed initial project lists, numerous projects. Again, that was all part of the plan. And then there's a framework of an initial recovery plan by Manatee County, which is required by the guidance. There was a broadband summit at USF, again, attended by departments, outside agencies, the EDC, the Community Foundation, and the Chamber, again, to bring peoples together to discuss what we should do with this wonderful grant. And then finally, the county developed a project list submitted through Ernst & Young and reviewed for initial eligibility to the first line, the initial guidance. And this is what our board came up with back in January of 2022. And as you can see, the full $78,327,000 has been tentatively appropriated to these particular 24 projects or project categories, because there could be numerous projects within them. So taking that initial list, breaking out and trying to combine how the guidance works along with how the clerk has our projects and monies classified, it kind of works this way, where 33 million or 43% of our monies of those projects were developed for public health and public safety. Most of it related to the impact of COVID and the fear that was going around the community then. And then 56%, 43 million, was for community or infrastructure-based projects, and just a small sliver for administration for Ernst & Young and the county compliance staff, Hunter, Melissa Kennedy, and myself now. This is kind of important. This is what really is the SLFRF. It really is a comprehensive $350 billion national recovery plan. And then that requires a county recovery plan. And then in that, it provides for us to have individual projects that are subject to an extremely complex network of regulation, compliance, procurement, and reporting. So it's not just gifting us money. It's a full plan, and then we have to tell everybody else about it. So, as I was going through, and thank you for letting me join the county. I've enjoyed every second of my stay. It's been 9 months. The first thing that we had to find out is what really drives this. And I noticed in many of the footnotes was Executive Order 13985, the advancing of racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. And that executive order further defined what equity means in underserved communities is defined as, allocating federal resources towards it, promoting equitable delivery of government benefits, engaging members of underserved communities, and then it establishes an equitable data working group. I didn't quite get that, but we'll talk about that. So also footnoted highly was this Office of Management and Budget Memorandum 2120, and it directed all the heads at the national level, state, treasury, et cetera, all the way down, to advance racial equity in support of underserved communities. And then it added teeth to this by having audit and oversight of this particular SLFRF. Also highly referenced in this was Executive Order 14008, the tackling of the climate crisis and in making climate change as part of national foreign policy and national security. And again, directing Departments of State and Treasury to promote capital aligned towards climate change and away from carbon investments. So this was in that executive order. I'm so sorry.
And it trickles all the way down to the project level. So now we're getting an idea, it's a little deeper than we thought. So initially, not initially, we have 7 categories, expenditure categories provided by the guidance. However, Treasury then broke it down into 83 subcategories, and the underlined ones are the 7 major ones. And as you can see, there's 14 different categories in the public health space, 37 in negative economic impacts, etc. 83. Good, Hunter. And many of those subcategories have their own set of eligibility and reporting requirements. And then what we initially believed to be eligible turns out that once FAQs and subsequent guidance was released, many of those projects were not eligible or only partially eligible because they would have to meet specific equity measures or climate change or labor or IT standards. So it scoped it down into those 83 different subcategories. Examples: Wi-Fi in the park, playgrounds, and other green spaces were only eligible if they were located in disproportionately affected communities, or peoples are also considered communities under this guidance. So they could only be in those spaces. Same thing with EMTs. Could only be eligible, the compensation, if they were designated 100% COVID cases. Now, I'm sure many people in the ambulances wouldn't know until they get to the location. So that's extremely difficult. Water and sewer would have to be, are only eligible if they met the EPA's drinking water and safe water state revolving fund standards. Scopes it down further. And then finally, capital projects over $10 million were subject to Davis-Bacon, the wage and labor standards, which required compliance and monitoring of our subawards and subcontractors all the way through the monies of any project that was over $10 million. Yes, ma'am.
Bill, I just wanted to tell the board, in all this that Bill is communicating with you is when the American Rescue Plan came into motion, it was trying to seek a response to the community based on what we had lived through in the pandemic, through CARES and so forth. But this one went beyond even more than just CARES. You know, now it's including infrastructure, now it's including capital, it's beyond just addressing, you know, public health, public safety. The only factor is that when this guidance came out originally, and this is what he's trying to portray in here with these bullets, is that it was so restrictive at the beginning, and that many counties came back and said, well, what are we going to do with so many restrictions when we have to procure it differently, when we have to follow Davis-Bacon Act, when we have to, there were so many strings attached to these dollars, and such a little time to get all these accomplished was getting kind of difficult to streamline the projects that we could do with this money. So, like he said, there's going to be a new beginning, and that's what he's moving towards.
Quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, in the parlance of the ARP, what does disproportionately affected mean when we're talking about like the Wi-Fi eligibility and things like that? Because if you say disproportionately affected, my immediate thought is elderly people in Manatee County. So, you know, are we putting Wi-Fi in parks in Lakewood Ranch where we have the most elderly people who are prone to die from COVID-19?
Thank you, Commissioner. Excellent question. It was defined, and there were many specific groups in the Executive Order 13985. People, again, negatively impacted. They suggested communities that have had racial problems. They mentioned the LGBTQ community. They mentioned ADA.
And I'm going to be honest. I was being a little bit snarky. I read the executive order.
Get it. I'm sorry, but I couldn't agree with you more, because especially with green spaces, all children All people need green spaces. And there were dozens of studies in the law that mentioned exactly what you just said, but they chose to scope it downward. I'm sorry, again, I digress. So the procurement side of the ARP, the SLFRF, is all based on 2 CFR Part 200 requirements, which are very restrictive, especially point 318 through 27, which requires competitive bidding, extensive justification if you were to sole source certain things. And the appendix of that section also requires very, again, driven terms and conditions on every PO that we would have placed. And also in the Act, it also specifically excluded blanket purchase orders and other commitments made under the CARES Act. So then the extensive reporting. There's quarterly reporting to Treasury. We have to segregate all projects by all those 83 expenditure categories. We have to reconcile all past and current dollars, et cetera, and monitor our subrecipients. And we have an annual recovery plan, which is very extensive, where we have to write executive summaries about our plan. And then within that plan, we have to explain how we incorporate past, future, current uses of the funds, how we've engaged the community, how we've promoted equitable outcomes, how we've collected data, again, on disproportionately impacted groups, labor practices, et cetera, standard-based evidence interventions, and finally, these performance measurement and reporting is all part of the annual recovery plan. And then we're also required to have an outward-facing website, and by law, by standard, it has to be 3 clicks for each individual. So then we go to our county website, and there's our button right here. And then when you click on that, you'll get our ARP. This is our front page. And then this has extensive information about what we're talking about today, as well as the actual report that we had to submit to Treasury, full with graphs and numbers and huge narratives. Thank you. But there's a new beginning. In July 27 of 22, Treasury issued FAQs redefining and giving us more guidance on that section called revenue loss. And we say new beginnings. As I go through this, we'll keep what we just spoke about in mind, but now we're going to go to the future. So the guidance allowed us to, or all counties and municipal governments, to take a $10 million standard deduction, just like on our tax returns. Or you could calculate how much your jurisdiction lost due to COVID. The FMD department, they worked countless hours to get that number. And on the next page will show it. But the purpose of Treasury of that law was to ease some of the burden because, as like Sheila said, counties and jurisdictions across the country, the burden of all that regulation and reporting and eligibility just made it almost impossible to use this money. But then comes revenue loss. And this is where I'm very happy to bring this to you, as I was to Sheila and Dr. Hopes and Hunter. Of course, we worked on it together. All government services, with a very limited exception, such as pension funding and things like that, are now considered eligible. So gone are that scoping that Commissioner Ballard mentioned. Now we can put Wi-Fi in every park, in every community. We can put sewers the way Manatee County puts sewers in. We can build buildings, and property management can do the things that they do as well, the way we do it. And then we are so fortunate they also removed the CFR 200 procurement standards for revenue loss projects, which means we operate under our procedures, again, as we do on a daily basis. So the good news is that FMD calculated that number to be $69.5 million of revenue loss. And as we all know, we closed, by governor's order, we had to close the beaches for a bit, and all that drove revenue down. We've calculated to be 69 million of the 78. And effectively, all remaining projects going forward, we can use revenue loss. Again, very, very, very minimal ineligibility. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. First of all, you always said there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Pretty obviously, looking at all the strings attached here, some of these things are pretty shocking to read. Dr. Hopes is first on the board. I would also just throw out there that Manatee County never closed the beaches. But Dr. Hopes, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. And as you, the four of you may recall, one of the first things that we did when we were aware that this money was coming is we engaged Ernst & Young to help advise us throughout this entire process, because having experience with the federal government and programs like this, it's a moving target. And you may be aware, and for the new commissioners, most of the counties around us sort of immediately started deploying this money and putting it out to other organizations and things like that. And even though the board was required by the clerk and comptroller to allocate all the funds before any of the funds could be spent, we were very judicious on spending, as you will see. We spent very little of this money because every time something turned around, Ernst was contacting us with a new provisional temporary rule coming out and things like that. And the strategy has paid off, as you will see, because as they got deeper and deeper into it and came up with the final rulemaking, it went from a challenging scheme of what you could use the money for to make it broader. And I kind of have to thank the governor, because I did not think he would pull off what he pulled off, but he followed that strategy to look at reimbursing the state for losses, basically freeing the money up so that it could be spent on other types of projects. And we followed pretty much the same strategy. And so what you'll see moving forward is that we have preserved these funds for you now, the new board, to determine how you would like to deploy those to benefit the community. And in a way, you have the flexibility of using it for projects which will now not have to be funded by the local ad valorem taxes. Now, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, may be paying back this federal debt. But I think you'll be pleased with where we have landed in this.
Thank you, sir. We don't have anybody else on the board, so if you want to continue.
So the revenue loss category that we're going to use going forward still has some requirements. It's still a project-based grant. We still have to do our quarterly and annual financial and performance reporting. We still need to have our website. It's a direct cost grant, so no overhead or interdepartmental allocations. There's no subawards allowed under revenue loss, which kind of limits our abilities to give money to, say, outside agencies like Feeding Little Tummies or something like that, where it would be outside of Manatee County. Our constitutionals are considered outside for this. And they specifically mention affordable housing projects. Now, it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means we would revert back to the other expenditure categories, which are more restrictive in nature, but they're still available. So nothing has been limited or removed. Now, this is a hard stop. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I just wanted to, we could continue talking about revenue loss, but I don't want you to think that Manatee County had revenue loss. This was a calculation that is during the pandemic. It is just the delta of what we could have potentially earned more in revenue if we didn't have the pandemic, but we didn't get. That delta is what they're calling revenue loss. The calculation is done every year to recalculate based on, because it has to be done on based on the last 5 years, right? Or 2-3 years, Hunter?
Yeah, sorry. It's financial based on the 4 years prior, and it has recalculation on audited financials every year.
And even though it may change, it may go higher, it may go lower, But if it goes lower, it only takes the higher of all the amounts that we have calculated, so we don't have to kind of like go back and revert if we had placed, any programs to the monies we calculated prior for revenue loss.
We do have a hard stop. We must encumber the monies by the end of December 2024, and those funds must be spent by the end of 26. There are no exceptions, and there are many provisions telling us how to return the money to Treasury if we don't meet these hard stops. So, we've provided a lot of background. This is where we are today. Again, this is the original list from January of 2022. Same 24 projects, same $78 million. We've just kind of highlighted that the projects that the board had designated then, they fall into certain buckets, as you will, under the expenditure categories. And projects 1 through 14 are related to public health, community infrastructure, 15 through 23, and then 24 is an administrative bucket. And that aligns the clerk with Treasury. So today, with all the information current that we have in FMD, we would maybe make some suggested proposals to the original list and move some of the monies either to different projects or closed projects, move money from. So if I go through, we'll be able to see exactly what I just said. First project is an active project. There's no changes. We're not asking for anything. The second project, EMS, we requested for some SUVs for the EMS department. The initial appropriation was $83,400. They came in under budget by $500. The project is closed. The vehicles have been received. And on the next slide, you'll see we're asking if we could take that the remaining money, and put it into a fund or a bucket for reappropriation or future use as decided. So the Moccasin Wallow ambulance, as well as the station, is underway. No change. We haven't had any motion or any activity yet on the parish house. Now, number 5, the EMS station, number 10 at GT Bray. What we're asking today would be to swap this project out because that station has been funded from other sources, so we cannot use ARP monies towards that $1.5 million. And there is a proposed Lake Manatee EMS station, and we're just asking if we could just move the monies towards that project. And again, at the bottom, you'll see we've closed projects under budget, and there's much money to spare.
Bill, if I may add, on the EMS station for GT Bray, as you are noticing, there is one caveat to ARP also, is that if you had a project already, you cannot swap a project if it's already in the already in the CIP or it's in the budget. You cannot what's the word that I'm looking for? Supplant. You cannot supplant a project for a appropriation that's already in the budget.
Yeah, this is for
Has
new
to be brand
projects
new.
only, not existing projects.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Correct.
That's understood. It is chilly in here, but that's okay.
Can those, sorry. Is that okay?
Oh, Commissioner Bearden.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Are we allowed under, the EMS station, can we also utilize these funds for like maybe increases in salaries for EMTs or anything like that?
Well, that would be operating versus
Would that
capital.
be? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I answer that?
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
Commissioner?
This is a one-time.
This is the
Stimulus.
beauty of the revenue loss provision. If it's a traditional government service, and certainly paying our staff the answer is yes, sir. We can use that money now. It is not as restrictive under the original 7 categories or 83 subcategories. So under revenue loss, we could say a new project to fund compensation. We could create a project and designate that money again as approved by this body.
But with that funding, you would have to be very careful because once you increase the salaries, this has an ending date. So on the following year, it's already an appropriation in the budget, so you cannot continue funding it through ERP.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. So as we work our way down the list, a lot of these projects are active, and we're not asking for any change. But good news on number 10, the board has had designated $10 million for the sheriff radios. That project came in at $9,051,000. And there is over $900,000 that we're asking to move down into, again, at the end of, on the next slide, you'll see that number's growing. Same thing with the Department of Health, the clinic for testing, that was for COVID testing. Only $530,000 was spent, leaving a little under $1 million, again, available for reappropriation, and we're just suggesting we put it down in that bucket. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
The clinic for testing.
We had a Department of Health, at the Department of Health, a clinic for COVID testing, and it just stopped being used, and then no monies, they didn't invoice us anymore. It hasn't been active, and then I believe we
How
closed
much left
it.
over from that?
I couldn't quite hear you, sir.
How much is left over from that?
Almost $970,000, sir.
Okay, number 12 on my list says $530,000.
Oh, no, that's what we spent. So what I'm saying is leave that in the appropriation bucket.
Gotcha.
I'm asking to move the difference down and make it available. I think the next slide will help us tremendously because you'll see it at the bottom.
I enjoy tremendous help.
And that's right here, Commissioners. $5 million. I'll go through each one. But so number 13, same thing. There was monies appropriated for the county COVID response, and we're recommending or suggesting that we do a line administrative, our team, our ARP compliance team, to segregate it out of that county COVID response so we would have our own project to align better with the guidance in Treasury. And then we're asking that we move $2.6 million for the two affordable housing loans, one to Riverview 6 and the other one to Astoria. So it has, again, it'll be its own project and visible. And then the remaining balance, $4 million, we're saying, if we can move it down to the green box available for reappropriation as needed. Okay. The COVID response from CARES, number 14, is closed. We spent $2.4 million, and we're just suggesting moving that balance again down into the reappropriation number. And then going forward, broadband is active. We do have a few Wi-Fi in the park, 3 of them they're going out for PO. Greenways and parks, again, no change. Then we come to what is formerly known as the Veterans Homeless Project, and we're asking this board if we could rename it to, say, Renovations Veterans Homeless Project, and then bring some money out of that for renovations for 2 proposed Manatee County daycare centers and the potential for office space, county government office space in the former jail space. And that's $15 million, so 8.5 remaining there. And then right now we're just suggesting maybe we could move 6.5 million for 18A.
Commissioner Cruz.
Yes, sir.
And then Commissioner Baugh.
I don't have a question per se. I just want to make sure people watching this understand that line, because the veteran housing was a big thing when we were moving this thing forward. It's been talked about for quite some time, and we allocated 15, which would have cost a lot more than 15. We've been trying to find other sources for that because that's a pretty extensive renovation. What you're seeing here isn't a step back in our desire or efforts or continuation of creating housing for homeless and transitional housing and permanent housing and wraparound services for our veterans. It's an adjustment in terms of how we're proposing to do it. It's something that we've been working on for almost a year now. A few of us met with the chair of Veteran Affairs up in D.C., and we got some contact information. We've been working pretty diligently. We believe in the long run, we're going to see a bigger, more substantial, more beneficial project in Manatee County just for lesser funds through effectively a public-private partnership. So that's allowing this. I just don't want people to see this line and see we're cutting $6.5 million out of veteran housing so we can put in new flooring in an office building. That's not the case at all. It's actually a better, more substantial project that can help more people with better services, but in a more economical way once it's ready to go.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
I just have a question on 18A. I don't know anything about daycare. What is that? Anybody know? Do you?
We are, this is a two projects in the pipeline for Manatee County government employees for daycare, I believe. And it's just in the pipeline, ma'am.
Perhaps we can get a briefing on that. I don't know anything about it. Thank you.
Commissioners, if you will recall, it was part of the discussion we had about moving the Aetna employee health benefits folks out of the building on 64.
I remember that.
To make it available for a potential daycare center for employees' children.
I missed that part about the daycare, but I mean, I do remember moving Aetna out. I mean, I remember all that, but just curious. I just would like to have an update. I didn't know we were going to do that. It's a good idea.
So my intention for the flow of the meeting, commissioners, was that once he completes the list, then I assume we're all taking notes and making marks on our pages, that then we would go through line items and discuss each of those. I apologize.
Yeah, you should have.
Happy to clear that up. Happy to clear that
Why
up
is
now.
it after I say something, he does that?
You're the problem
Why
child.
is that?
Okay, sir, go ahead.
So working our way down, commissioners, we're not asking for any changes from 19 down. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if these these are just proposed changes for all of you, that would leave for consideration. That would leave us $5,542,000 unattached to a particular project and allows for whatever our administrator and our staff and our board would decide. So it's just available. And there's some extra calculations at the bottom, again, just for informational purposes. Again, the FMD calculated the actual, not lost revenue, but what we didn't quite during the COVID for $69,495,000. Now, we've already reported over $10 million under the prior guidance, and before we were fully utilizing the revenue loss provisions. So at this point, we still have $67 million that we can use under these relaxed guidance and guidelines. And and we have interest earned of the monies while we're waiting to appropriate these, to expend these funds. We earn $364,000 in interest.
Dr. Hopes.
Yeah, that's an important point, because while this slide is showing like $5 million, the reality is we've only reported a little over $10 million of expenditures. And many of these projects haven't been initiated to a point where there's like no turning back. So really you're talking around $60 million for reconsideration by the board. And I think there's an encumbrance slide.
Yes, sir.
And so as you go through this step, we have left a pretty open slate for this new board to reconsider the allocation of these funds based on the benefit of the qualified revenue loss calculations.
Thank you. I think that sums up what we were all hoping to hear. Commissioner Cruz.
I want clarification, because I hear what you're saying. I don't 100% agree entirely. I don't know if this spreadsheet just is not accurately reflecting things, because that's great. There's some flexibility, but I'm looking at pages 28 and 29, for instance. That one shows the appropriations that are being proposed, the amount approved to date, effectively. And then you're kind of working your way back to here's what's left. Like $10 million has actually been spent. That sounds like the amount we spent on radios for the sheriff. But For instance, 13B, which is Astoria and Riverview 6, 2.6 million, it doesn't show any approved submission amount. So effectively, that's seeming to imply that that's part of a bucket of fungible money that can still be maneuvered, but it can't. Some of this was just a work session discussion of niceties for ARP. That particular line item was physically voted on by the board, approved by the board. The documentation has already been executed for that. So that's not really a movable variable that we've got. I don't know if the spreadsheet, and I'm using that as an example because I know about that one. I'd like to know what other things have either been voted on to move it forward, which effectively makes them static on here, or things that have already been pledged to or committed to people that expect that. That's the real number we've got left over is the actual movable pieces of niceties, not things that we've committed, even verbally or voted otherwise.
Could you go to the next slide?
Commissioner Cruz, if I may, very good remark. And when we placed Astoria and Riverview 6 in this list, it's because there is a commitment behind it, but the money itself has not been pledged in an account. It has not been brought forward until they actually close on the item, on the buildings. And at that point is when I will actually put it in the column for the appropriation, fully appropriated and committed on the next column that you saw on your page 28.
You may recall it wasn't, the board did not specify that it had to come out of the ARP funds when it was, so we identified additional sources of funds. And so when the project closes, then the budget amendment will come to the board to decide which account you want the monies to come out of.
Yeah, so we're financially committed to the project. It's just a matter of which account it's coming from, as there's no commitment there. Okay, is there anyone else? All right, go ahead.
Okay, so this turns into a little more CPA talk and my comfort zone. What kind of following Commissioner Cruz? The first project, 316, what was appropriated, and that department, EMS, submitted a project for $316,000. And at this point, they've placed POs for $227,000. So at this moment, I'm saying that they've submitted a project, it's been approved as eligible, and they started spending down on that project. So I'm suggesting there's no ARP funds available because that project, again, is fully committed. And that's how this calculation works all the way down the page. And yes, Commissioners, I did use the recommended changes for the first column. I had to pick a spot, so I chose, assuming that the suggested changes are accepted, that's the column number 1. That, again, that's not in stone. I was just using that to do my mathematics to show what we could have available for projects. And what you're seeing in column 1 is what has been submitted in column 2, and in column 3 these are actual expenditures and or POs that have been issued against those projects. So, and using the Sheriff's Radio as an example, they submitted to us $9,051,000, and that is exactly what the PO and the clerk cut the check for. So we're saying, and I've asked if we could take that money and move it down to the remaining balance. So available is nothing if you accept that closed project and putting that remaining monies down in that available number on the next slide. So this is just to give us a status. If you were to ask, about certain projects, I'd be able to tell you that, well, there's POs, or we've hired a scientist, or ambulances were purchased. This is what this is about, where we are to date.
And we have made the comment that you have $67 million left after that $10 million that we had already placed under the former guidance and spent. But the truth of the matter is that, like without being committed, you have 45. Who's to say you can also change your minds and say what you already committed for? You might want to change your mind and say, I don't want to go through that route. We're just bringing it forward to you so you can see the big picture. beyond and above.
And we greatly appreciate that.
So this page gives us a final synopsis of where we are. Again, $78 million is the ARP. We have 32 million of actual approved submissions coming from the various departments in the county. We've actually encumbered or have expended $15 million as of the time of this meeting. And just basic math, 78 million minus approved projects of 32 leaves us $45 million. One could say, again, notwithstanding if the board has approved the project, but if you say changed your mind, we don't have encumbrances for a lot of these projects. We've made the monies eligible to the departments, but if they don't encumber them, you might say, well, let's do something else. And that's how this was presented today, that it's available. And we have $67 million under revenue loss. So basically, what we're really saying is we can use the lesser stringent, lesser complex provisions of revenue loss for whatever monies the county would like to spend. Okay. So, Madam CFO?
I want to comment also in some of these line items, you may see that some of them are designated for a purpose. Others just say a generic term, stormwater projects, broadband. Inside and within each one of these categories, there is, like in stormwater projects, approximately 19 projects for stormwater that have been identified, and that because they're already, ready to, and for the, movement of the project, we have kind of like moved the guidance, made sure that it follows the guidance, that it's eligible and everything is kosher. And now they're seeing about bringing it forward to the board for your approval. Broadband as well, there's a couple of loops, fiber optic loops at certain parks that have been identified. Again, they're preparing the documentation and we are identifying first the eligibility before the board can even see it for approval. Because if it's not eligible in every single aspect, we will never bring it to you to see it. Now at this point, I actually want to ask you about how do we want to process amending this list? This is your list from now on, and it's free for you to change it, amend it, modify it, add, delete, remove, whatever you want to do. But first we got to understand what are we calling changes and what we are not calling changes. Okay? So that's why we kind of like put it out there. What we consider to be changes, one, it's dollars from one existing project to another existing project in the list. So again, you can decide that an existing project in this list is not something you want to see as long as there is not encumbrance commitments that have been previously approved. And you may say, no, this is not the route I want to take. I want to move the money out of there and put it in a new item or an existing item, or just remove it altogether. Or if it's completed the project. The other is that dollars from existing projects to proceed new projects. You can have, and this is what we're coming to you today, is that you can, put a reviewing process so you can tell us, is this list what you want to see? Or do you want to modify it? We're not necessarily asking you to do it today, but we would like to create a process where we can actually make it organized and streamlined so that when you have a desire for a project, for a new project, we can bring it. FMD can identify all of it, whether it's eligible, it meets everything by ARP standards. And then we can flow it to the departments to see so they can work their logistics and so forth of the project on your behalf. And then at that point, once it goes to the board, if that's your wish to do it there, then we will add it to the list and it will move forward. So So the question mark is, how do you want the process of amendment to follow? We are open for suggestions. We will take the notes and we will bring them back to you with in a briefing, so that it's all kosher from here on.
Okay. I'll start by saying that this delivery and this presentation I think, was perfect, was exactly what we were looking for, and gives us, I think, the tools we need to sort of go back into our 7 corners and and sort of hunker down and review the list and come up with our suggestions for redlining and adding and keeping and so on and so forth. So personally, I think this is perfect. I think we should all sort of go back into our corners for a couple months and come back in a special meeting where we can vote and probably have it in this room where it's more of a workshop style, but we can actually conduct votes once we make our decisions. Commissioner Baugh is on the board.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I was going to say exactly what you said, so totally agree.
Okay. Anyone else? No one else. Sheila, that's like Commissioner Satcher, of course, sneaks in just before the deadline. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a question, we had the parks up there with $2 million, I believe, on parks. What parks expenditures are, do qualify and what would not? Would a new park qualify?
Commissioner, I'm very happy to say again that it's any government service. If we traditionally put a park in with Manatee County funds, it is now eligible under this new provision, sir.
But it can't be something that's already on the CIP, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
You can also plan what's already in the budget.
What, not just on the, correct me if I'm wrong, but it only references projects that are in the budget and are funded.
Okay.
So the CIP projects that are out 3 years, they're not funded yet. The board hasn't funded them.
We have a great wish list of unfunded ideas.
Well, exactly.
That's no problem.
The other thing I was suggesting is you don't necessarily have to wait till the meeting. Each of you as an individual can meet with Hunter and Bill to just talk through these ideas and get them to vet it beforehand on how it can be accomplished using these funds.
Sure, and I thought that was implied in what I said earlier when I said go back to our 7 corners. Obviously, reach out to staff, the appropriate staff, to talk about, questions. I had lots of questions, for instance, regarding some of the utilities projects and if it could be funded through utilities instead of this program that would free up millions of dollars.
And I might note,
Commissioner Satcher, I'm sorry.
The Wi-Fi that's up there is for utilities because we have found out that we don't have reliable Wi-Fi out at the dam and the water plant.
Right, okay. Commissioner Satcher.
So rather than us go to our 7 corners, I wanted to just go ahead and put this out there while everyone's here and we can talk freely. So as some of you are probably aware, I shouldn't even necessarily say my district. It's just the whole eastern and the northeastern part, which is mostly my district, I guess, of the county. It is where families are moving. I mean, the whole county's growing, I understand. But we have a situation where kids don't have a place. We've got one park meant to be more of a community park. It's just, Buffalo Creek is not big enough to put the amount of soccer and baseball fields that we need just for kids to be able to play. So I'm not asking for, I won't mention anything that any other parks may have because I want everybody to have really great places, but this seems pretty basic. We got from 2 years ago, I believe it was $3 million put aside for soccer with the idea it would be somewhere around 675. And those talks with, we all know because we deal with it day in, day out, if someone owns 200 acres in East County, that is, that's their gold for them because they want to be able to put, houses on that. But we have someone that's been talking to us that owns a lot more than that. And their main concern, I thought that kind of negotiations and things had stalled, but I was able to sit down with them a couple of weeks ago and looks like interest is renewed. Their main concern from this property owner that owns plenty of, I shouldn't say plenty, but a large amount of property here in Manatee County, it seems like their main concern is they wanted to be sure that it ends up being really nice. and so they wanted to look at what facilities we have, because I just kind of posed the question, and at some point I said, what if we, if the county was able to do this project for you? Well, basically the answer came back, they want to have input, but that is something they're interested in, and it would just solve in many ways, besides roads, which we all know, but it would solve one of the biggest issues for residents in my part of the county, and Commissioner Baugh's as well, and for all of us. We know that it's good for all of us. And so anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, that we had $3 million. It looked like the person that was kind of at the table with us might not be as interested as we thought they were, and things have renewed on that front, and it might be something that is good for every single, all 7 of us to look at and say, this is something we got to accomplish, because I can't squeeze any more out of Buffalo Creek. We are putting little short-sighted fields where there used to be woods, and we're moving golf courses out of our way, and there's just nowhere else to put the soccer and baseball fields. I need land to do it, and it seems like I have someone that's willing to cooperate with me, but it would take money, and it would be but it sure would be a great thing for all of us to be a part of, and something we were already on the hook for before, but it may take more to get it done. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate y'all's consideration on that.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Ballard.
I agree that could be a worthy use of some funds, but we have other problems in the county that are not going to be as readily or easily addressed. And I think that funding like this could really, really be used. So we have $4 million toward homelessness. I don't know what's intended for that money, but I think that we could really do some robust things in that realm with some of these funds, as well as some of our really underserved areas of the county that don't necessarily have as much of a tax base. The parks in Parrish will come. The parks in Parrish will come. I can tell you that. You know that. I think that the federal funds need to be used in underserved areas that are not going to get attention otherwise.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, they both make sense for different reasons, and I know we're going to have this conversation later, so I'll keep this broad and brief. On one side, we've had this conversation previously. Our great-great-grandkids are going to be paying this thing back, so let's build long-term generational type assets and amenities that they could take advantage of since they're going to be paying it back. And we've had this discussion, and that's where some of it goes. But on the flip side, I also understand what Commissioner Ballard says. Some things we have funding for. It may not be today, but we have funding for it at some point. Like $6.5 million to build out our own office space sounds like a CIP project, not something that benefits any citizen whatsoever, just a few thousand employees of Manatee County, and that's $6.5 million. That's a chunk of change. It's almost 10% of our funds that could be used outside of government itself. Parks, other things. There are things that we have a funding source. There are some things we just don't have a funding source for, like Astoria and Riverview 6, for instance, like homeless. We don't have a bucket of money. We don't have a millage that's tied to any of those things. So we have to be cognizant of that this is an opportunity to get a lump sum amount of money that can be used for things that we otherwise don't have sources for unless we take it out of ad valorem general funds at the expense of other services. So let's make sure we're aware of that as well. Just to speed something up 1 year, 2 year, 5 year off of its standard funding source to get it done a little sooner at the expense of something that will get done never if we don't use those funds is something we need to consider.
I'm next on the board, and I would agree with pretty much all of what you said. From the very beginning, I've sound like a broken record stating that I didn't necessarily agree with this stimulus package. However, our taxpayers either paid into it or are assuming the debt, and the debt will be on the shoulders of future generations. And therefore, as Commissioner Cruz stated, I've been saying from the very beginning, whatever we choose to spend this money on, I would strongly encourage the board to spend it on something, a forever asset, something that will be enjoyed by the future generations that ultimately will be paying for this. Parks certainly fall into that. And there are, as Commissioner Ballard said, though, there are underserved areas in need of infrastructure type projects. Rivonia is in my district. There's a community center there that has some needs. Currently, they have some. We've wrapped up some major infrastructure and sewer and sidewalks in Rivonia, but there are still other needs in that area that's underserved. And there are also organizations in this county that provide a service to the county, and its services oftentimes, as we get into subjects like homelessness, there are services that are provided to the county, industries that we do not want to involve ourselves in. We do not want to get into the business of the Salvation Army, right? For instance, another one that I think of is down in Commissioner Ron's district, which is Easter Seals. Our school district and this county are not really eager to get into that business by any means. And Easter Seals has some infrastructure needs, infrastructure that would be in place essentially forever, right? That would greatly benefit the county as a whole, even though the location physically is in District 4. It still benefits the entire county. So that's just another example. But I'm sure we'll get into this. And I'm not by any means discounting anyone's suggestions up to this point. That's just a philosophy of where I hope that we will go. Commissioner Cruz?
Yeah, what you said is interesting when we're thinking about things, because people helping us, like one of the things you see in nonprofits, and I've dealt with a number of nonprofits, is a lot of times they're just getting from one year to the next, and they can never grow or get bigger or do more for a community because their whole goal is to collect enough money to pay the salaries and do the work to keep the status quo going. And every year they spend half their time just chasing the money to keep going. But there are situations and opportunities where a meaningful shot of capital or support can move that entire nonprofit to a whole new level long-term and permanently. So we talk about generational support. Some of it is tangible, parks, roads, things like that. But other times, generational support is just moving a community or families or people up for future generations as well. And that's also generational support. So like you mentioned, Easter Seals, excellent example. I mean, they're looking to expand. They're bursting at the seams. So right now they can keep collecting their couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million, whatever they do, year after year after year, and stay the same size, helping the same number of people. But you bump them to a whole new level through helping them expand. Then in the future, they can continue on, but in an expanded basis, helping the community for longer term, helping those families generationally for a longer term. So that's something to consider. This is an opportunity, instead of a children's services fund handing somebody $100,000 to help them pay for the care, the caseworkers, you hand somebody $1 million or $2 million. Now all of a sudden they're a whole different nonprofit for generations to come. So this is an opportunity to potentially look around and say, where are these, to your point, where are these services that we don't want to provide? That is not government's job to provide, but to support and help with, the turning points, the Easter Seals, the Centerstones, the people of that nature, that, maybe we can get them over the hump to a next level and make them a different organization in the future with these funds. And I also believe that's a generational support.
Yeah, it's well said. I agree. Dr. Hopes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, normally I would send a public safety alert out to you. I don't know if it has gone out yet. There was a significant bomb threat at Parish Community High School. MSO believes it's going to take about 5 hours to clear the building. So public safety is setting up a reunification center at the Manatee County Fairgrounds. Student drivers are going to be cleared by the Sheriff's Department to leave. Everybody has evacuated the building. Parents are lined up all over the place. So students who are not driving their own vehicles are going to be taken to the Manatee County Fairgrounds for their parents to pick them up. So just to let you know, that's what's going on if you start seeing social media and constituent phone calls. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anybody going back to the workshop? Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the workshop at this time? Commissioner Satcher, you have the card in your hand, and I know you're just waiting for me to pick up the gavel and thank everyone for coming. So we'll just go to Commissioner Satcher.
Well, I'll go a little bit out of turn, and we'll take my prerogative. Let's have we had our invocation this morning, but Lord, we thank you that you keep our students safe in Manatee County. And Lord, I pray that anyone that's trying to just make trouble or report things that aren't true, Lord, that you would get to the bottom of that you would help people find who's responsible. And then also, though, Lord, we know that there is real evil in this world and that tries to do children especially harm. And we pray that you would move on their behalf, that all the authorities and our sheriffs would just be led by you to keep them each safe, each step of the way. We thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen. Going back to our discussion, I just wanted to point out that on bringing up the park, I actually wasn't mentioning anything as far as taking away from anything that we're looking at on this list. I was just putting some vision out there. I think it'd be a good thing to look at seriously. That's all I wanted to say, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I don't think any of us at this point is redlining anything. We're just throwing some, general ideas that might be in our minds and in our hearts that we think will better the county for future generations. So it's a wonderful opportunity that we're presented with, even though there are an awful lot of strings attached that were in some ways disgusting. But still, it does create opportunity, and we can work within those boundaries and those strings. I think we can do a lot of really great things for this county going forward. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to then recess this meeting until. Yes, ma'am.
Can I add something else?
Yeah, she is. So that's a Satcher move. But go ahead, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
I'm just teasing. He always sneaks in at the last minute. Go ahead.
Just one last comment.
Yes.
In your handouts, you have the final list of the approved projects, all 27 of them. We will move forward, and we would hope that you would come back to us with any suggested changes or anything to the list so that we can bring it back again for full approval.
So let me ask the board this, because I'm glad you brought that up at the end. Would the board like to, in say 2 or 3 weeks' time, because the thing is, though, you're going to need to sit down with more than just Sheila, I think, because there are department heads involved in a lot of this as well. Do you want Sheila to reach out to us and say 2 or 3 weeks' time for individual meetings, and then you just tell her what department heads or what departments you need represented in the meeting based on your questions on this list? Okay, so Sheila, why don't you do that in a couple weeks' time? Reach out to individual commissioners, and then once you've completed, your meetings with all those commissioners, just get with me, and we'll set a special meeting in this room so that way we can take action on items, and that's the way we'll proceed from here. This is a great presentation. This is really, I think, exactly,
Thank you, sir. We will
really
do.
exactly what the board
Thank
wanted.
you so much.
So, okay, thank you. So we're going to. Do I need to not recess? What do you? Oh, wait, do public comment. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to hold public comment on Section 2, which was ARP. Is there anyone who'd like to come forward to speak on? Oh, perfect. Anything that'd like to speak on the ARP section today, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Betsy Benak, Manatee County. I'm actually here for the LMAC, but got a little bit concerned listening to this simply as a citizen. You got a lot of projects, a lot of funds. I'm really glad to hear that a lot of the regulations have been changed, so we don't have a lot of those ties that were there before. But I got really concerned when I heard it was kind of a slush fund that you could do whatever you wanted with. I did not like, and I know that was not the statement, but that's what I heard, that you have a fund that you can do whatever you want with. I would just encourage you, because a lot of people are looking at these funds, to make a process similar to like you have a capital improvement process so people know. You said you're going to go to your 7 corners. Well, I hope that means your citizens that you represent and ask them what they want to see, because I know that, I'll just use the affordable housing, for example. There are people, I volunteer every week at Turning Points. There's needs in affordable housing. So I hope that when you decide what that funding will go to, that the public has an opportunity to speak to what the proposed projects are. And that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward for public comment? Yes, sir.
Rusty Chenis, 7091 Longboat Drive East on Longboat Key. I hadn't intended to comment on this. I just want to make one brief comment that there's a lot of worthy projects here, but any money that's left over that could be directed toward water quality projects will benefit all residents of Manatee County without a doubt. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak on this section? Okay. All right, seeing no one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to recess the meeting at this time, and we will return after lunch. So do you want to just come back at 1 o'clock? Okay, we will recess this meeting until 1 o'clock. We're in recess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're moving our way through our workshop today, and we're on our third of 3 items, which is Environmental Lands Program Update. And we have the great Charlie Hunsaker here to present for us. That's right. That's an introduction, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'll turn things over to Mr. Hunsaker.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Charlie Hunsaker with the Natural Resources Department, and I'm here with Deborah Charles-Worth, who is the Environmental Lands Program Manager, and we will be presenting to you effectively a strong update about the progress of your Environmental Lands Management Committee that followed your appointments. And I'll just say from a standpoint of introductory remarks, this slide to me says it all. We are all of us, focused on the conservation of Manatee County's environmental heritage to benefit today's and future generations. I've been privileged to be part of the first environmental land acquisition that Manatee County undertook in 1986 when we ran a public referendum campaign to acquire 10,000 acres of STEC phosphate lands in our drinking water watershed. And that was followed by a series of acquisitions with state assistance, bringing us today to a 30,000 acre inventory across 16 specific projects. And it's our opportunity today in talking through the LMAC programs to now look to the future and see how we might continue to build on that inventory to balance development, transportation, infrastructure needs, and conservation, many times working together. Many properties have all those 3, development, infrastructure, and conservation. Also, many of our family farms here, the Harleys, the Taylors, and even the Faulkners, who are a new family to this area, own property with conservation in mind, in addition to development and income and family security. We work with each of these families. We work with each of these concepts and thoughts. And of course, we work for the county administrator and yourselves to bring us to this point. So our first slide is going to just kind of go over what we're going to hope to run by you today, is to give you an update of the progress of the LMAC committee that since the reorganization to a 17-member board that you directed to acquire, that happened in March of 2022. We've had 4 meetings since then to develop ideas, thoughts, and now even priorities for recommendations coming through the committee to yourselves. And it's our opportunity today to inform you as the progress we've made, and also for the new members of the board, kind of run through the steps that led us to this point and what we'd like to describe as the decision matrix that every community that I know of in Florida that has a program behind them like this have followed to structure a nomination process from owners or other parties, to structure a review process, and finally to bring those recommendations to each of you as board members for your consideration, consent, and direction to move forward. And we'll close today with that type of request for your direction to continue the process to move us in a position in the future to make some real acquisitions. But to get there, very transparent, very open to the process, very much involved with the LMAC committee and members of the public and your staff. So on that basis, let me introduce to you the key staff member in our department whose profession it is at this moment in her career to bring this program to you and to the public so that Manatee County, once again, can be focused on the conservation of our environmental heritage to benefit today's and future generations. So thank you, and Deborah, take it from here. And hold on to that mic.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Attorney Clegg. I'm grateful to be here this afternoon to give you all an update on the Environmental Lands Program and also convey recommendations from the LMAC Committee. One of my roles as the Environmental Lands Program Manager is also as the LMAC liaison, staff liaison to the LMAC committee. And so I have been updating the advisory board webpage since I began, and it contains the updates since the 2020 referendum was approved by voters. And as several of you recall, in 2021, there was a resolution approved by BCC authorizing LMAC to implement the Conservation and Parks Projects referendum. And in light of when that ordinance was last reviewed, what the new ballot language said, and what had changed in conservation needs, we made some updates to that LMAC ordinance that were approved at the very beginning of 2022. And 12 members' seats were appointed by the commission in March of 2022. I included a history of LMAC starting back from 1993. The role of the committee has changed a couple times over the years. And because the advisory boards are not part of the online agenda system, I've been putting the agendas for meetings on this webpage a couple weeks before the meetings, and I have links to the minutes as well after they're approved. Of course, when our tax dollars are being reinvested in the community, it brings a lot of interest and oversight. And so I've also created an Environmental Lands Program webpage that explains the process, procedures, and I wanted to point out that there is a button on that page that will open a nomination form. So anyone can nominate a property. If they can't use the form, I can take nominations over the phone. There is a copy of the form in the packet if you'd like to look at it. There's also a copy of this process chart. And as you can see, the process begins with a nomination. And after nominated, then there's a preliminary or desktop assessment by staff. And we're looking at the natural resource value of the property, primarily using a bunch of GIS data sources. If the property ranks in the upper levels, 3s or 4s, rather than the lower rankings for the screening criteria as 1s and 2s, then we consider it to be likely qualified. Reach out to the property owner, see if they're interested in having their land considered for conservation acquisition by Manatee County, and schedule an on-site meeting, learn more about their priorities for the property, their timeline, and verify and expand on what we learned from the desktop information. And the next step is with the advisory board. They review the information and provide feedback and guidance to staff on priorities for further work. Let's see. For the properties that are recommended for acquisition, we move on to develop a work plan. And this is going to be sort of an iterative process through the timeline. The purpose there is to give an idea of what we're committing to and what this investment would be. So it would include cost estimates for acquisition, not an appraisal yet, cost estimates for restoration, maintenance and capital improvements, what type of public access could be provided, and what the funding sources and methods of the acquisition could be. Was there a question? No? Okay, thank you. So if a commission directs staff to proceed in pursuit of a property for acquisition, then we begin spending, incurring the first costs. And we work with our land acquisition team to start appraisals and the other aspects of due diligence. If we reach an agreement with the property owner, then we come back with a contract for BCC approval, then execute and bring back for approval again at the closing. So we've committed, although it's not in our ordinance, we've committed to following the Florida Forever process for appraisals, and that is having qualified appraisers from their list chosen, and for property over $1 million to have 2 appraisers, and if the costs are greater than 20% apart, then you have a 3rd appraisal and follow the formula for selecting what that offered value would be. So I wanted to touch on the ranking criteria that we use and why. The natural resource value, there were 4 criteria that were established back in 2003 in our LMAC ordinance, and they're pretty standard throughout the conservation community. Ecological quality of the habitat or species, the rarity of the species or habitat, connectivity to other conservation lands, and also the importance to water resources. So jumping forward to almost 20 years, the referendum language had some very specific things in there, and we wanted to make sure we're honoring the intent of the referendum and what the voters approved. So we've included each of those elements in our review: drinking water protection, water quality protection, preventing stormwater runoff pollution. Some of these things are very highly related. Nonetheless, they're all listed: preservation of fish habitat, wildlife habitat, and the national parks. So we're bringing forward from staff to LMAC lands that are highly qualified in those areas, recognizing that there are other considerations that may be the deciding factors. First of all, we have to have a willing seller to be part of the program. If there's a discount, if there's other funding sources that help in the purchase price, timelines, and the will of the board.
I wanted to make a point of emphasis there on the willing seller side of things. We often receive nominations from well-meaning individuals who drive around the community and say, that is a location we need to look at and preserve. And they'll nominate a property like that, but we follow a strict procedure of notification to the owner. We are not going to do anything in terms of an official government action on notifying or walking around the property or asking if we can get on the property until the actual owner is notified. And instances, we often give a written letter that we've vetted through several other agencies who are faced with this same challenge. What do you tell an owner that out of the blue they get a letter from the government and said, we're interested in your property? That's a very delicate message to give to a property owner who says, no, I'm not interested at all. And we give that owner an opportunity to say that and to check that and return that communication back to us. Now, luckily for us, several times owners who have been contacted say, I've been thinking about that. My family's been talking about, I'm getting on in age and I might, I'm interested. And they'll sign a letter of interest. It's not a contract by any means, but at least we know the owner is in a position to not feel threatened or obliged to do anything from us. So we've been careful at the very beginning not to overstep our authority or get out ahead of your desires, for heaven's sakes, in working with owners who have, now the owners who have self-nominated, obviously they're very interested. But for the others, and there have been several, we've made sure that the owners have returned a written note back to us. Yes, I'm interested in moving forward to talk to you about it. So I just want to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. And there is a copy of that letter in your packet. If there's an owner that we can't reach by phone or email, we'll go ahead and mail that letter. And of course, at any time they say we're not interested anymore, we pull them from the list and it's not discussed at a meeting, no public meeting discussion, and is removed from the consideration. So we have been working hard on coordination and partnerships because that really helps our tax dollars go farther in acquisition. There are a lot of organizations that have common priorities and goals. We can help each other with those. We have 2 organizations in the state. One is Florida Forever, state of Florida, and then SWIFMUD, Southwest Florida Water Management District. They have priority lists for conservation, and we can apply to them for funding support. And so on our maps and all the projects, you'll see whether a property is considered for acquisition by them. And I've been mapping throughout my entire career, and I have the slashes go this way for Florida Forever. The slashes go this way for South Florida Water Management District. So if you see a crosshatch, they're both interested and might both be able to provide funding support. So there are also opportunities from the federal and the state programs for easements for agricultural use, and other organizations that could be very helpful in habitat restoration if that's necessary. Also organizations that are land trusts, not-for-profits, that can help us in the acquisition process. Counties have requirements in how they can make transactions, and sometimes things need to move faster or more flexibly than a county can move. And so those partners can be very helpful in that process. There's also local organizations, groups, committees that we participate in and meet with and collaborate with as professionals on a regular basis. So one of the most useful tools that was developed by our in-house IT and GIS group is this Environmental Lands Candidate Property Dashboard. And the county recently upgraded their software, and so now I have an opportunity to go in and make some improvements and enhancements so it'll work a little better and look a little slicker. But it's a very functional tool nonetheless. So in the top right corner, you'll see there's a drop list, and those are the candidate properties. So if there's a willing seller, if they're being considered for acquisition, and you can select one, the map will locate to it. From the map frame, you can zoom in and out. You can turn layers that are relevant for consideration on and off. And the rest of the dashboard are some indicators that are helpful. The acreage is in the bottom left. What portion of the value of the property is in an improvement, like a home or homes, buildings, infrastructure? And what portion of the property is in an impaired water body? What kind of water quality improvements that might offer? And those other tabs are some of the information that we type in that are relevant, the type of acquisition, public access, recreation, partners. The tabs let you switch over to get more details or reference documents. So when we do our site visits, we take pictures, we post the pictures in there. If we have surveys or other types of maps about the property, they're there for everyone to review. And importantly, the screening criteria, the rankings, 1, 2, 3, 4, for those four main criteria, and then also the referendum considerations are there. And on the far right is 6 more different data sources that are part of the Florida Forever Conservation Needs Assessment that prioritize land for conservation. So each of those different measures, the darker the colors, the higher the value. The lighter the colors, the lower value. And another tab has a land use plan covers. So, at a glance, you can just shift from one to the other, and they're all giving you the same colors, same sequence comparison, just to really quickly compare these important considerations for each property. And we use these, our commission can use them, LMAC uses them, the committee members, and we actually navigate through that during our meetings. So it's one of the best ways I have to compile and share information. So an overview of our property nominations, these are sort of by the numbers, and don't try to do the math because properties come and go out of each of those categories pretty regular. There's a regular flux. Over 75 properties have been nominated. About a dozen of them are self-nominated. And of those that were higher ranking, staff has brought forward 15 for thorough review by LMAC. And these numbers are going to, if you see a conflict, it's because on your cover sheet for the item, it said 4 being recommended to BCC. One of those dropped out, and this priority should be 2 instead of 1. So shortly today, I will be sharing the properties that are recommended for acquisition to BCC for authorizing staff to begin the due diligence process. That doesn't mean we're committing to buying it. We're just saying, yes, we support this, or no, we don't support that, and so go ahead and start the due diligence. Begin appraisal, start putting together those work plans, and we'll see how it shapes up, and this will be revisited at another time before an actual decision is made. So that leaves about 40 that were, say, lower on the list or more difficult to get to. We took, sort of the, I don't want to say the low fruit, but the higher quality properties that were more time sensitive and so on to choose first. So among those that I would expect to be brought forward in the future are based on when a willing seller arises. Some that may have said yes, no, I'm not interested anymore, might come back and say yes again. We want to be considered. Also making connections between the existing preserves, and there's some sort of green Crayola marks between them you can see here. And what I'd like to do is work with the community groups and seeing if there's an interest there in helping making connections between those conservation lands. Also, contacting owners that have out parcels for each of the preserves, because not only would it make a more complete conservation area, but often it increases the cost for managing those properties if you have a homeowner living in the middle or irregular boundaries. So some of that is cost effectiveness as well.
Again, I wanted to comment that you see abundance of green in the eastern Manatee County, and that's there for a reason. Obviously, the development pressures there are not as intense as they are in our western areas of our county, not as intense as they are in development pressures north of the Manatee River. But they also reflect activities by the state of Florida, in addition to ourselves, to recognize that there is value, ecologically speaking, valuable for the important plants and animals of Florida to be interconnected, so that they can move along waterways like the Manatee River or the Little Manatee River, or in this case, the Myakka River, interconnected so that nesting behavior of some of the important birds that nest in concentric and ever widening circles, like the scrub jay. Believe it or not, some of our customers are scrub jays, in addition to the customers that support us each and every day. And these animals and birds, avian and amphibian, benefit from being able to move from one place to the next without hopping over a mile of developed property. So we try to give priority to connectivity. We try to give priority to parcels that lie on the borders of places we already own, where they can be easily managed by the existing staff that is there. We try to give priority to the important natural resources that have been called out in this referendum. And fortunately, most environmentally sensitive areas are connected by proper habitat, water being the thread that sews all of these important things together. That can also occur on the coast. And we've identified properties there. So we're about ready to go into some recommendations that have come to the top very quickly. They've come to the top very quickly because we've had willing sellers, number one. Number two, they meet the criteria, kind of been waiting in the wings to see that if a program like this were approved by the voters, they're ready to go. Because some families have had these in mind for a decade or more. And they've jumped at the chance to get there and get in line. But we have to remember this is a 15 to 20 plus year program. Properties will be coming and going. We have a powerful spending ability behind your vote and the vote of the public that we honor and respect. And so there'll be acquisitions in the future that we want to hold. We want to hold the funding that will be prepared for those acquisitions. But the time sensitivity of some of these projects are very real. Because owners are willing to work with us now. A decade from now, perhaps not. 5 years from now, perhaps not. And frighteningly, maybe 3 years from now, perhaps not. So we're a good position, even though development is outpacing all of us. Seems like we're always trying to catch up from various activities. The Environmental Lands Acquisition Program is well timed right now to move on some important properties that your Environmental Lands Management Committee have recommended for you to consider. So we'll go into those at this moment.
All right. So the first of the 4 properties that have been recommended for consideration for acquisition is, we're referring to it as the Terracea State Park Addition. You can see from the map that it's just south of the port, and it's within the optimal boundary of the state park according to their management plan. It has a tidal creek that flows in and out to Terracea Aquatic Preserve, and while it was once used for citrus, and there are some exotics there, there are also some nice natural habitats, some cabbage palm hammock, and reportedly a midden on part of the property. So it is within the Florida Forever proposed lands for acquisition. I've been in touch with them, and they are having the real estate services group gather information to consider it for a formal review. So there's likely some funding that could come from them. Likewise, it's on the Southwest Florida Water Management District list, and I've submitted this for their consideration. And the response back so far is that 97% of the parcel contributes to 3 of the 4 of their priorities. And so they are taking a look at helping in the acquisition of this as well. Now, I mentioned that this is within the optimal boundary of the state park. And so we've talked about this with the state park. Of course, they fully support the acquisition. And while Manatee County could manage it, because it's within their park boundary, they've agreed that they could manage it. So there's no long-term cost to Manatee County. The state park system is working on a letter of commitment to the state program that they would be willing to do that if the property is purchased. So great value in this is protecting and restoring the coast, providing for the health of fish, invertebrates, and manatees as well. The current owner is actually a bank. They obtained the property through foreclosure. It was previously proposed for development. And so we don't anticipate that there will be any deep discounts on this property. I anticipate that we would need to pay appraised value for the owner who is willing to sell it. So the public access would likely be hiking trails. There are some hiking trails that go from a small parking lot on, I think it's Bishop Harbor Road, and go up to that property. They could be extended and loop around and go back. So we have some generally estimated costs here, provided by our land acquisition group for the appraisal fees, title search, the environmental phase 1, stamps, closing, survey, etc. So those subtotal under $70,000. Optionally, Manatee County could help with some habitat restoration, removal of some of the exotics that are on site. We don't anticipate funding any capital improvements because it would be managed by the state park, and any improvements would be made by the state park. An internal land value opinion, not an appraisal. So lots of disclaimers there. Not an appraised value would be between, say, 3 and 4 million. And just taking a educated guess at what the other organizations would contribute, it's possible that the land could be acquired for under $1 million contribution from Manatee County. I have made it clear in talking with Florida Forever and SwiftMud that if it were just a hassle to work this through Manatee County and they wanted to acquire the land jointly and all I did was put them in touch with a willing seller, that would be fine with us. Everyone's goals would be met without a cost to the county.
Did you hear that? It could be a total state acquisition. And then following that, it could be a total state management. This is kind of like, wow, how come someone didn't think of this before? But sometimes you need to pull the trigger, make contact with the owner and say, you've got a number of interested state parties here that want to bring this property into their management of Terracea State Park and Aquatic Preserve. So this is very valuable and promising to us. We're ready to take action on that one. But okay, not so much set up for the next that's going to be coming. But this was kind of like unbelievable. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So the remaining 3 properties that are recommended form a sort of complex here along the Manatee River that connect nicely with other conservation lands, some that are just easements, not county owned. This is upstream of Fort Hamer and just east of Devil's Elbow and Hidden Harbor, I believe. The first of these properties, Gospel Crusade, is owned by the church on the south side of the river. And it was brought to us probably maybe in 2021 or early 2022. All 3 of these were owner nominated. And the realtor who was representing the church and coordinating with the county, one of the things he had to work on before we could buy this, if the board supported it, was access to the property, because access to the river is wonderful. It could be a great place for paddling, camping, picnics, and so on by boat or canoe, kayak. It's very shallow water there. to have access by land, especially for managing the property, is important. So the realtor was working with the adjacent landowners for access. And as it turns out, the land just east of it, which we're calling Gospel Crusade East, that property owner said, well, rather than just provide you an easement to access it, I'd be willing to sell the whole property. A lot of it is wetland. A lot of it's not developable. And I think they had considered some of that for mitigation in the past, but realized it wasn't something they wanted to do. So there's a yellow arrow. I don't know if you can see it. I can get my mouse going here. This yellow arrow right here would be where we could enter the property. And that's the clubhouse of Twin Rivers. It's right on the river. It's a lovely community amenity. But we would have access through there and possibly create a small trailhead and parking that would allow people to walk in and enjoy those amenities as well as paddling in. Excuse me? Is there a preserved old house on that property along the river? I have some on the one to the south. There is, yes, and I'll show you. No, it's not currently preserved. The one on the south side is not, but there is an old home there. Hopefully this will explain a little better. So the Gospel Crusade property, it is primarily scenic river floodplain. It has a really interesting past use, and it's along the Blueway, and I have some of the Manatee County Blueways booklets, and I can leave each. You can take one with you if you like. And it's actually described because it's an interesting focal point in that greenway in the booklet. So on the right is the old map from when it was a Christian retreat. And they could paddle over from the south side of the river where the church and some people lived and land. There are stations for prayer. There are places to camp. And unfortunately, they're all in pretty poor condition and would likely be a hazard, for as far as liability goes. So some repair or replacement would be necessary. This bridge is, nonetheless, it looks like a lovely place to explore and walk over. Top left, one of the camping huts that actually had a cistern. When I recently went back to visit this property with some more staff members, Hurricane Ian, I suppose, had blown a lot of that to pieces. But it could make a very interesting place for new pads for camping and using some of those existing trails. So there's a large pavilion that is still in pretty good shape. We actually sat and had lunch there as we discussed the property. So the third of the three pieces is it's along Williams Road, and it is at the end of Williams Road. The property owner had actually talked with the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast about selling a conservation easement and using it as a retreat, and their plans changed. They're now moving to Tampa, so he is interested in selling the land fee simple. And the map that you see here is one that was produced by the Conservation Foundation. It shows an area that was once pasture for some cows and some llama. He's been planting longleaf pines and is planting some slash pines to restore it. He's very much a conservationist. There are some trails along the property. He purchased it in 2020 for just over $1 million. The home that is on the banks has some great old Florida feel to it. I say that speaking as a Floridian. And it did flood in 2004 when there were issues with the dam. And it has not been maintained over the last couple of years. So I suspect that it would not be cost effective to actually try to restore it unless it was just using the foundation and the roof as a sort of a open air structure. There is a place to launch a kayak or canoe. There's not an actual boat ramp, but it could be a place where people could enjoy a hike, a picnic, and also paddling, perhaps even just to get down the river a little ways to go and explore the Christian retreat. So the habitat that's been documented there are some unique species. Too much or too little? Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. So there are some disturbances. There's a neighboring community that might be interested in connecting some trails. As I mentioned, there are some rare species that have been documented on site as well. All right, so that is the last of the we'll say four properties, even though there are two areas that are recommended.
I'd like to follow up one more time. I'm sorry that interconnectivity, water resources, habitat movement, public access and enjoyment. I'm going to say that the combination of these three properties in the middle of Manatee County and the developing area around it on the Manatee River is a very unique opportunity. Now, some of it is not developable, but some of it is. And the opportunity to connect these properties with our property immediately and shared property to the west, extending all the way to Fort Hammer Boat Ramp, is well, it's really kind of fell into our lap. This is really a good move for a riverine, floodway, floodplain, protective, habitat value move for three property owners that are working together. In effect, I don't know if they talk to each other, but once again, something that we should take advantage of relative to the timing of the opportunity and the values that are there. Thank you.
All right, so now I'm moving on to two properties that LMAC has voted unanimously to have as priorities. And by priority meaning focusing staff attention and time as a property that's worthy of that. You know, we have over 74, we can't work on them all at once. So that's what priority means. They're giving us that feedback. Oops, if I can get the right direction going here. All right, so the first of the two priority properties, not recommended at this time, but considered priority, so may be recommended in the near future, is we're referring to it as Parish Farms Preserve. It is just on the south side of Lake Parish along State Road 62. It is 1,800 acres, and it was nominated by the family that owns it. In the past, it was used for tomato and citrus. Currently, there are no more tomato farming out there. There's grazing and some citrus. And it is so unique to have an opportunity for a piece of land that is so large and fairly centrally located. You know, a lot of us, think of that as being way out east, but relative to the county as a whole, it is fairly central and could be an opportunity for a great resource for recreation, outdoor, all those wonderful things our preserves bring, and an area that is rapidly becoming highly developed. There's developments surrounding it. In fact, on the east side is a 5,000 acre, I think it's called Gamble Creek, that was approved for development. And that's about 17,000, the size of Palmetto, basically. Population and area is about the same as the size of Palmetto, just on the east side. And, from conversations I've had, that developer would be interested in working with a preserve on their west side for, the benefit of all. Of course, it's good for their community as well. So why would be interested in 1,800 acres for conservation? Well, while 1,000 are in crop and pasture, 280 acres in tree crop, there are 470 natural wetland and upland acres. And that is more than we typically see in any acquisition. There's 17 species of greatest conservation need documented on site. And that has a lot of value. Nonetheless, an acquisition that big would take a lot of our precious conservation dollars, right? So the millage was 0.15 and would be expected to generate about $7 million a year. And there's that option to bond up to $50 million if the commission approved it. I would guess that a property like this would probably take between a third and a half of that, $50 million. So as staff, we're looking at how would we support this family's desire to preserve their land with as much other funding sources and ways of preserving this so that we reserve as much of those millage funds for other natural conservation lands as well. So we have been working on that. And so we're looking at what are the facilities on site. This map shows, there's a packing house, workforce housing, barns, cattle pens. Of course, opportunities for passive recreation are expansive. A lot of things could be created there, including the Gulf Coast Trail and funding to create that trail. Restoration is something we definitely have the expertise to do. It just takes time and money. So what other funding sources could help us with any restoration? And then, of course, there's the continued agricultural use. All of this is a big challenge, and recognizing that, we invited the Trust for Public Land, and they shared the same, they recognized the value of this property and shared in our vision of what it could be for our community. And so they have actually established a contract with the property owner, and it would close in 2024. So they have been leading this charge. And Doug Hadaway with the Trust for Public Land was actually here today, but he had a 2:00 meeting he had to step out for. So you may have seen him, you just missed him. You're welcome to follow up with him independently of county staff. So they've applied for an agricultural easement from the NRCS that could fund half of the cost of the agricultural easement possible for the state program, Rural and Family Lands to fund the other half of the conservation easement. A private owner could buy the property without the cost. Of course, the cost of the easements would be covered already. So they would pay the remaining to buy that property. And that's one way of funding it, even without the county's support. Now, the county could be a funder of that easement, but they don't have to be. Okay. So there are some opportunities on the southern part for wetland restoration, which could be used for mitigation. Also for gopher tortoise relocation, which brings funding with it as well. So, all right. So the second of the two priority properties is referring to it as Perico Bayou. And as you can see from the map, it's north of the causeway. It is... it's part of, or it's enveloped by the Perico Preserve, and the property owner, if they were to develop it, would request an access to the preserve. And there's a letter in our file from an attorney saying that they would like that. There's been an agreement that rather than do that, they would sell to the county. And I guess that agreement has been in place for a number of years and just have not taken action on it. There would be minor additional expense to the county, just a very small amount of exotic species removal, the minor long-term management costs because it's right there within the preserve. And it's possible that we could get funding support from Southwest Florida Water Management District.
And so the next slide, I know we're time sensitive here because it's an important meeting that you want to call at 2:00. And so I'm just going to fast forward to the actions requested. Again, as you remember from our flow chart, there are certain steps that come along the way that the board's involved in all of the final decisions, of course, and some of these preliminary ones. And this is one of them. We're asking for your direction on the properties of the Terracea Addition, Manatee River, Williams Road, and the two properties identified as Gospel Crusade East and Gospel Crusade, that we could continue our work and in fact expend funding for work on the due diligence stages to seek an appraisal, for instance, to get an idea of what kind of costs would be valuable, to get an idea of where we would be in a negotiation posture with the county. And that's it for this at this stage. No other action would be needed. But we would like to continue the process as identified in our flow charts to move on these properties. And that's what we're hoping to receive on a basis of basic consensus today, I believe.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hunsaker. So I have myself, Baugh, and Cruz on the board. Just for quick, and Ron, just for some quick direction, I liked the first two that you showed us that were both along Terracea. I see they seem to both be lumped into number one. Is that right? You showed us two on Terracea, did you not? Or was it just one?
Just one.
One Terracea. All right. Okay. Whoop. That's okay. You can go back to your list that you had. So personally, I like number 1 and number 3 on this list. I'm not a huge fan of number 2. I'm actually fairly familiar with the property because it was for sale for some time, and I did show it at one point. And so that's of the 3, that's the only one I've been on. But anyway, so personally, I really like 1 and 3. I also love the way you're finding other funding sources. I think that's really smart, and we're paying pennies on the dollar in the end, right? We're getting massive discounts and really stretching the $50 million that we have to the maximum ability. And I like that you mentioned camping as well, because I've talked to Mr. Hunsaker about this, and that's something that I would like to see expanded. Is that we don't? It really showed during COVID, right? We don't have a county necessarily facilitated campground. We have locations at Duet and at Rye where you can camp, right? Robinson has some spots where you can pitch a tent, but it's really not like an open, more or less like an open, active campground like you would normally think of. Particularly Robinson, you have to reserve it, and it's usually for special events. That sort of thing.
Group camping, yes.
Yeah, it's for groups. So I would personally really like to see camping expanded, and I thought that number 3 would be a fantastic spot for a campground. And then my only question for you is, what about Mosaic? Have you been in talks with Mosaic to acquire properties, sort of, for not full value here, right? Property that they have already. Everybody's waving their cards now. For properties that they have mitigated, right, and that they essentially have to maintain from this point on, they're just sitting there. There's no public access to those properties, and I really want to get the public. Some of them are beautiful, right? If you got was it 62 out in Duet, they have an absolutely gorgeous piece out there that. It's where the turtles are. Yeah. And so, anyway, you see my point.
Yes,
so
I do.
We could possibly pick those properties up, I'm hoping, at quite a discount. So I didn't know if Mosaic has communicated with you at all, or where they are.
They go through a process to release those lands from the reclamation criteria of the state of Florida and Manatee County. And when they're released, they go back either on the market or the company holds them for a time. So this might be a dialogue you may have with them in the coming months when they bring forward their operating permit renewals with you.
Perfect. Okay, so the speaking order now is Baugh, Cruz, Ron, Ballard, Bearden. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the chair. I think number 1 and number 3 are the best ones to look at this point, but I do have more questions. So I'm glad that we can't, quote unquote, vote today, because I would not be ready to vote, but I would like more information on 1 and 3. Thank you.
Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of liked all of them, but I don't know enough about number 2. So if people have been on it and don't like it, then I would kind of defer to them, because I'm just looking at it based on a piece of paper. But the Terracea, and I love that Gospel Crusade opportunity. My question is, do we have a list of other ones we've looked at that explain why they're not moving? Because we don't really see much until now, or at least I haven't seen much. Like, I'm looking at some of the SwiftMud stuff, like to the point of camping. I'm looking at one of your maps, and it's got the hatched lines for this huge piece of property and area just north of Lake Manatee State Park. I mean, an opportunity to acquire land that basically completely circles around that Lake Manatee State Park and creates more of like an Alafaya type thing where there's active outdoor activity and camping and so forth is awesome. There's a piece right between Chance Reserve and Duet. That's a big piece of property. I don't know who owns it or what the current. I'm just curious if we've had that kind of dialogue to see why we're now looking at it, because that piece between Chance and Duet creates a massive preserve. The piece over Lake Manatee connects with Rye Preserve. I mean, that's a pretty amazing opportunity for use of these funds. So I guess that's my question more than anything. I personally like all these opportunities. I think they're great. I thought we were going to make a bigger run at that Anderson piece, but I guess that's kind of like a second tier at this point.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it is a second tier. The properties you mentioned in Lake Manatee and the Ed Chance Preserve, they're held by a single owner. And I've had conversations with that owner, and the interest on their behalf is not to sell. I will say, from an advantage standpoint, though, that the lake shore of Lake Manatee on the north side, which is a critical habitat to continue use of our reservoir and water quality, there's been discussions that a recreational trail, in conjunction with the development plans of the developer, is a very real possibility. That he's looking forward, they are looking forward to working with the county to create a public access route along the north shore of that reservoir. From frankly would prohibit then, or would not allow then houses along the shoreline and 30 docks along that mile of shoreline, and they're interested in working with us there. But as to the larger acquisitions that you mentioned, they've expressed that they are not interested in moving forward with a conservation effort.
Gotcha. All right, thanks.
Okay, to be clear, I didn't say that I didn't like the Williams Road piece. I just feel that there are better candidates.
Oh, again, like I said, when I saw that on paper, I thought they were all great. I love the Gospel Crusade one. I think that's an awesome opportunity that we definitely need to run with.
I agree.
You had made the comment about the Williams. I know the general area. Obviously, I
Yeah.
live like across the street from it, but I haven't been on the site. So.
Right. And I'm going to be, in all fairness, disproportionately favoring, coastal properties, most likely, to be fair. Okay, so Ron, Ballard, Bearden, and Satcher. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on LMAC in general. To date, how many properties have LMAC purchased to date through the program?
Since the 2020 referendum?
Yes.
We're getting there.
Okay.
The answer is no.
I'm just trying to figure out how many environmental sensitive lands have you guys purchased through the program?
We have none.
We have none?
None. This is our first iteration, and it's rightfully taken the time to get it to this point. But yes, there have been no purchases made yet.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well, we just created the board, and it does have to fund itself. Commissioner Ballard.
So not to beat a dead horse, but I agree with much of what has been said about the Gospel Crusade opportunity. I think that is excellent. I also agree with Chair Van Ostenbridge about increasing camping opportunities and maximum public access. As for the Terracea property, Mr. Hunsaker, you had mentioned that might just be a complete state acquisition, right? And we might not even have to put any money forward toward that. So I mean, that's fantastic.
Yes.
And frees up our funds for even more great properties.
Mr. Chairman, there's a process much like we viewed with Rattlesnake Key, where the state would make an effort through their existing programs of the state park, the Water Management District in combination, they would have the interest in acquiring this property. If we were to contribute anything, if they were sometimes they'd look to the local government and ask, well, are you going to be a witness to this or a participant? And there's an opportunity as a participant for some maintenance activities, some trail development. What that does, in my opinion, it gives us the assurance that Manatee County residents and the general public will have access to that property on a timely basis. We all know that the state of Florida's resources for its many parks are as limited as most places, and it may be if they take total activity control, it may be some time before a trail is opened up or a parking lot. I mean, it might be years down the road. But if we were there with a small commitment, we could change that timeline and accelerate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, what Charlie's trying to tell you is the state park system is underfunded. They take forever. And so if we have some ownership, we can manage it with our park system, and it will actually get done and be managed like Robinson and some of our parks that are managed so well. Commissioner Bearden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do this. I just think that, just like what everybody else is saying, number one and especially number three, I just think number three is such a unique piece of property that there's not a lot of out there, and the opportunity there so that the constituents of Manatee County will be able to enjoy this piece of property is exceptional. So if we decide we want to go this route, how long does it take once we make that decision for the constituents to be able to use that property typically?
It's a little difficult to estimate that timeline, but I'm going to start with 1 year. there's the process of acquisition, there's a process of a decision to acquire with an agreement with the owner and their consent to our appraisal process. We're going to follow the same appraisal process the state of Florida follows when they buy conservation lands. That is designed not to overpay. That is designed to test the market, seek a discount from the owner, and all other things so that we are getting an appraisal that is a fair appraisal, but it is not one that is weighted heavily towards the development value in the future. The state's been very careful not to overpay in the millions of dollars that they have spent over in the decades behind us to make sure these acquisitions are fair traded acquisitions. We want to follow that same appraisal process. So an owner may be expecting $10 for a property, and we're going to come back and say, no, it's $6. And if you really want to go now, it's $6. And that's how we're going to be negotiating. We really don't have a lot of up or down limits here. We will rely on state certified appraisers to give a value. And that appraisal process is going to follow the traditional practices that Manatee County follows. We have a land acquisition group with property management department. They'll be running the appraisal process and the negotiation, and we'll be there. So we acquire the property, we get involved with the clearances. It could be about a year after that. And one last thing, of course, the purchasing power lies in our bonds. And the bonds must be accumulated for an amount, sold, and then made available to us. And that process, I've been told, takes about 6 months to go from yes, we'll go, and then yes, we'll buy. And so 6 months for acquisition, 6 months for other matters, time, about a year.
So with number one, Terracea State Park, that addition, is there going to, typically, sometimes I see like out east at Manatee State Park, there's like a fee associated with entering that park. Is that going to be something similar here?
At Terracea, no, I don't believe so, because they passively manage their properties now. There's no driveway in, no ranger's office, no admission ticket like Lake Manatee State Park. This is more, Terracea is a series of wildlands that are connected, managed to keep development off. Public access is allowed, but there is no dedicated infrastructure that is associated with many parks where emissions are charged. And I do not see dedicated infrastructure coming to this parcel either.
Okay, so properties 1 and 3 are both located in Commissioner Satcher's district. Let's hear what he has to say.
Right. I like them. No, I would echo what's been said about 1 and 3. But then I was going to check because you had mentioned the property on 62, but then it's not on the list of things that you're asking for direction from us. Is that because it's farther behind or farther ahead, or where would you be? Do you need direction from us, or any questions on that?
Is farther behind. And still working with the owners, and the Trust for Public Lands, for instance, is still actively working with the owners to try to talk about an assemblage of users, funding sources, and things. And so we are not actively engaged with the Parish Farms property. The momentum there is being carried by that nonprofit. We are witness to it. We're watching it, but we're not actively involved.
No other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Hunsinger, as far as direction goes, how do you feel about what you've heard regarding 1 and 3?
I appreciate the parent consensus there that we can move forward with these 2 parcels to start the due diligence process, and that's all.
Commissioners, does anyone
yes,
take issue with Mr. Hunsinger moving forward with items 1, Terracea Addition, and 3, Gospel Crusade East and Gospel Crusade? There are 2 separate parcels. Okay. I think you have some clear direction then. Why don't we go to public comment at this time? Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on our LMAC discussions, on everything we've discussed since lunch? All right, sir, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Wait, excuse me, Russ. Is your microphone on? It has to be a green button.
Know that. Okay. Did everybody hear what I said that first time? You could hear me? So anyway, I've been a resident of Manatee County now for a little over 4 decades. And I came here because I love the water. And it was family. Family brought me here, but it's the water that kept me here. Of that 4 decades, 35 years of that, I had a building business, a building contracting business on Longboat Key. The fact that I'm an avid angler, that's what brought me here to the water, and I spent a lot of time on the water and have for the last 4 decades. And that is why I'm here and why I'm a member of the LMAC committee. And why I've been involved with a lot of other organizations over the years. Just to give you an idea, I was a co-chairman and one of the founders of the Sister Keys Conservancy that helped preserve the Sister Keys. One of the co-founders of Sarasota Baywatch. I was a past president of the Florida Outdoor Writers Association. And most recently, I'm now the chair of Suncoast Waterkeeper. That's all because I care about that. And I really want to applaud this commission for having the foresight to take up the properties that we're doing. I think it's so important. I mean, it's important to fishermen. It's important to restaurateurs, people who love to go to the beach. But what we're doing here is going to also going to benefit future realtors, future developers, and future builders, because we're going to be preserving the quality of life that people come here for in the first place. That's why people come to Manatee County. So we have to have a balance. I've been a building contractor, I know. I've seen what happens when we don't preserve our environment. When we have these red tide events, I've seen what it does to my business. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I want to thank you once again for your honoring the will of the 70% of Manatee County residents who voted for this referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak on what we've covered since lunch? Yes, ma'am. Please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Catherine Prophet. I live here in Manatee County. Like you, I've been here about 40 years, so a good portion of my life. I can't say that I'm specifically familiar with those exact properties out on the Manatee River, but my gut is telling me that the Manatee River at Williams Road site might be higher and drier. So if you're looking for camping, that might be a better spot. Just a bug in your ear. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time? Ma'am, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Betsy Benak, Manatee County, also serve on LMAC. I just want to make sure, and I do appreciate all the work, staff, you, the board, putting into this. It's a very exciting time for Manatee County to have this resource to go forward, to be able to acquire some land. It's really exciting. But I want to make sure the Williams Road, was that necessary to provide access to the Gospel Crusade, or did I get that wrong? I thought that's what I heard, or do I have it opposite?
No, for clarity, Gospel Crusade Aid.
So, sir, we don't dialogue during public comment.
Oh,
it's an opportunity
that
for
was
the
my
public to
question,
speak to the
but
board.
thank you, and thank you for bringing these forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time? Okay. We're going to close public comment. Mr. Hunsinger, do you want to make any comments regarding what you heard during public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Gospel Crusade East is the parcel that provides access to the Gospel Crusade parent parcel, and that's why they work together. Comments on, I'm going to say comments on Williams Road. I've walked all 3 properties myself. The Williams Road property, again, from that Williams seller, it is the drier of the properties available. And it does provide that type of opportunity. As you know, as you've shown the property, Mr. Chair, perhaps it retains that character of more of an upland component to a riverine forest, and that's why it was a high value property for all of us coming forward.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there any other comments from the board? Okay, you think you have clear direction, sir? Okay. Commissioner Satcher, do you want to throw your flag up there before we adjourn?
I should add that the LMAC, that committee, they're very dedicated and do a great job, work hard.
They are, and we appreciate all that they do. Commissioner Baugh.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can't let James go last. So
He's going to wave his card again.
I know he's going to hit it again. No, I just wanted to say thank you to staff for all their help in the committee. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone. This workshop is adjourned.